One Piece Blades of Fire Chapter 461-480. Chapter 461, Lingji Bodhisattva. Zhang Yang shouted at Huang Feng, but he didn't make any movement. I don't know if he was stunned or scared. When he thought that he had to rely on Huang Feng to escape from this yellow sand desert, Zhang Yang had to turn back, so he wanted to take him to hide first. But when Zhang Yang ran to Huang Feng's heels, the monster finally made a move, and saw it open its big mouth full of fangs and spit out green pus into the sky. In an instant, the strongly corrosive acid-smelling pus scattered down the sky, forming a heavy rainstorm that swept toward the ground. Zhang Yang has a golden bell, and he is not afraid of these acid rains, but Huang Feng has nothing to protect him, and his situation is very dangerous. Seeing that the acid rain was about to fall on their heads, Zhang Yang threw Huang Feng to the ground, then pressed him on top of him, trying to protect the two of them with his golden bell hood. At this moment, Zhang Yang suddenly found that the light around him suddenly dimmed. At first he thought it was because the acid rain was too dense to block the Admiral Sun, but when he heard, bo 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 bo, raindrops coming from far above his head. At the sound of the tapping, he hurriedly looked up, and saw that the sand not far from his feet extended up, forming a sand wall, which blocked the acid rain for them. I love Luo, Zhang Yang exclaimed in disbelief. This motherfucker is an empty sand wall. However, Huang Feng, who was also excited, also shouted at the sand wall, sure. Is that you? Sure. Without any memories, I know that after the acid rain, the sand will be scattered to the ground again. Huang Feng knelt on the ground, grabbed the sand on the ground indiscriminately, lifted them into the air, and shouted, sure. If it's you, answer me. The demon had already moved. It fell heavily to the ground and twisted towards Huang Feng. At the same time, the gravel that was shaken by its huge body suddenly seemed to have come to life, and they rushed towards the monster's body. Go, as if to bury it in the sand. The demon also sensed something was wrong, and began to wriggle wildly, trying to break free from the sand. When Huang Feng saw the familiar scene in front of him, his eyes filled with tears. Sure, it really is you. Then Huang Feng turned into a hurricane and flew towards the monster, and together with the sand around it, formed a wind and sand formation. Entangled in the monster. Then, the whole desert seemed to come alive, and they waved like an ocean, swarming up and down toward the demon, burying it again in the depths of the desert. After all this subsided, calm and tranquility were restored in the entire yellow sand desert, only the whirring of the wind remained. The wind blew, causing a few strands of white hair to flutter in the air, and finally landed on a hand stretched out from the desert. Wukong was about to go to heaven to ask for help, but before he could fly out of the mountain, he met an old man who was chopping wood. The old man had no intention of being afraid of Wukong. He asked, "Where is the monkey going?" Wukong saw that the old man was amused and said to him, "The bald donkey who was taking the scriptures was captured by a monster in Wangfangling. I am now looking for help from heaven. Do you know any capable immortals?" The old man nodded and said, "There is someone you are looking for in Shaoshumi Mountain in the south of the country, so hurry up and go." After speaking, the old man left in a hurry. Wukong watched the old man walk away, and saw a white smoke rise again, a familiar shadow in the sky. Wukong smiled and said, "I just said that you were wrong. Good thing you are 2 white gold star. You are pretending to be a ghost, and you can tell me directly if you don't have it. Who are you afraid of?" In the south of Shaoshumi Mountain, there is a Zen courtyard with auspicious light under the auspicious clouds in the mountain. Wukong was about to break in, but was blocked by the guard who guarded the door. "What is the great sage doing?" Wukong explained his intention to him, and the gatekeeper went in to inform him. After a while, Lingji Bodhisattva came out and invited Wukong in to drink tea. When Wukong had time to drink tea, he hurriedly explained the purpose of his visit. "The person who took the scriptures was captured by the monsters. Go with me quickly to save his life." Who would have thought that Lingji Bodhisattva pinched his fingers, and then touched his back, showing a surprised expression. "Oh, why is my Chenkin bag missing? It must be the monster who stole it, and the great sage leads the way." Wukong didn't say anything, but he started to curse in his heart. This Lingji's acting skills are too bad. He didn't know when he lost the bag at the back of his butt. He must have put down the monster. Ask for a reason. After the two came to Wangfangling, Lingji Bodhisattva waved his hand lightly in the air, and a dangling circle appeared in front of him, and inside the circle was an endless desert. Lingji Bodhisattva looked at this desert and suddenly sighed with emotion. It's true that times have changed. Back then, this desert was still the boundary of my little Mount Sumeru, and somehow I came to this bag of heaven and earth. Wukong couldn't help but ask, "Come on, what kind of monster is that?" After that, Lingji told the origin of the monster. The monster was originally a wicked animal that endangered the world. Later, in order to subdue it, Lingji asked a desert under Xiaozumi to seal it. Later, a monster named Huangfeng fell in love with the desert. In order to take her away, he stole Lingji Bodhisattva's Chenkin bag and put all the desert into the Chenkin bag. At this point, Wukong interrupted him and asked, "Why didn't you bring that demon back to your house when you knew it? Besides, you all know these things, what did you pretend to be with my grandson just now?" Lingji Bodhisattva said embarrassedly, "This is all calculated by fingertips on the way I came here. I have always been in a closed state when I have nothing to do. How can I care about these things?" Wukong waved his hand and said, "Quickly help me find where the scriptures are. Why do I have a bad premonition?" Lingji smiled and said, "Don't panic, the great saint, I have found his position." In the end, the two of them came to the place of the hand. Wukong held the hand and pulled it hard, pulling out the unconscious Zhang Yang. Wukong couldn't wake up no matter what he called, and then Lingji patted his shoulder and shook his hand, meaning he had a solution. Lingji came to Zhang Yang and pinched him, but there was no response. He opened his eyelids and looked, but there was no movement. Then he raised his hand and slapped him loudly. Zhang Yang opened his eyes in an instant, stared at him and took a deep breath. When he saw Lingji Bodhisattva and Wukong clearly in front of him, he got up and ran over to hug Wukong, crying, "My monkey, it's coming, you don't even know how terrifying it was just now." Quote. Wukong stroked Zhang Yang's hair and comforted him. "Dear, little bald donkey, I'll take you out right away." Lingji looked at the two of them from the side, with a complicated look in his eyes. Chapter 462, The White Dragon Horse Behaving Weirdly. "I said too, can you pay attention to your image in broad daylight?" Lingji said with a blushing face. Zhang Yang turned around and saw Lingji's strange eyes. He turned and asked Wukong, "Who is he?" Wukong said, "Lingji Bodhisattva, he just slapped you to wake you up." No wonder Zhang Yang felt hot on his face. He touched his face and asked, "A slap?" Lingji hurriedly came over and said, "It's to save you from waking up, but now that you've woken up, I should say goodbye. The yellow wind and sand in this desert, as well as the evil animal, are all installed in the universe. Better in a bag." Quote. Zhang Yang nodded, feeling that what he said made sense, but he continued to ask, "You slapped me just now?" Lingji swallowed, then waved his arm. An entrance appeared in front of them. He said, "If you have anything to say, let's go out first." After the three walked out of the yellow sand desert, they returned to Wangfangling. As soon as Zhang Yang came out, he saw Baji and Bailongma. Baji went up to him and asked, "Master, are you all right? Are you injured?" Zhang Yang held Baji's hand and was moved to tears. "My good pig, it's fine for the teacher." Then he saw the white dragon horse that was grazing on the side, and rushed over to the horse's butt with a kick. The horse roared and asked loudly, "Bald donkey, what are you kicking me for? I'll let you die." Zhang Yang kicked the white dragon horse's ass again, scolding, "I'm so good to you, I treat you like a BMW mount, you ungrateful beast, I can't kill you." Seeing Zhang Yang teaching his apprentice, Lingji couldn't help laughing, "Poochie." After he reacted, he hurriedly covered his mouth, but unfortunately it was too late. Zhang Yang had already walked over, touched his face and asked, "Just now you slapped me?" Lingji coughed a few more times, patted his head, and said, "Oh, my Chinkin bag is still on that Huang Feng, I have to go back and look for it. You guys talk first, if you have nothing to do, go on the road as soon as possible, pay attention to safety. He opened the entrance and got into the yellow sand desert. At this time, Zhang Yang fell into contemplation. Since the Chinkin bag is in the desert, why can Lingji open the entrance to the desert? Ba Jia, who was on the side, led the white horse and said to him, Master, let's go on our way. It's getting late, so we can't sleep in this mountain. Zhang Yang asked, why can't we go into the mountains? Baji glanced at Wukong, shook his head and said nothing. After Zhang Yang smelled a strong smell of blood in the air, he saw the bodies of various monsters lying in the forest, and said in surprise, you have killed so many people. You have committed a killing ring. Sins and sins. Wu glanced at him blankly and said, if you are not a monk, don't say what a monk said. What is the sin? They are all cannibalizing monsters. Wouldn't they be praised for not beating them to death? Hearing that Zhang Yang was a man-eating monster, he hurriedly changed his words. I mean that you have done a good job. This kind of monster who is causing harm to the world should be killed, and it should be killed to the extent that nothing is left. This is what Zhang Yang said. He was still so stuck in his heart. He had been thinking about Shui and Huang Feng since just now. One of them died tragically at the hands of the demon, and the other stayed in the Chinkin bag forever in order to seal the demon. What is the ending, good or bad? Seeing Zhang Yang's frowning face, Ba Jia asked him what happened, and Zhang Yang told him about his feelings. After listening to Baji, he said to him, Master, everyone and everything in this world has their own destination, and this should be their best destination. Miss Shui, Miss Shi and Huang Feng, they are together. If you stay in the Chinkin bag, you can be considered together, whether it is in the form of life or death. Quote. Zhang Yang didn't quite understand what he said and asked, can we still be together after everyone is dead? Baji shook his head and said, death is a way. Miss Shui changed her way of life through death. She is still here, but in a different way. Zhang Yang was skeptical, when Wukong scratched the back of his head beside him and said, there is a saying, my old grandson also thought the same when he was eating people in Wagwo Mountain. Zhang Yang looked at Wukong's harmless expression, and then looked at each other for a while with Baji. The two shook their shoulders tacitly and didn't speak again. In the yellow sand desert, Huang Feng stared blankly at the desert in front of him until he heard footsteps behind him, then opened his mouth and said, can you save her? Lingji Bodhisattva asked, who do you want to save? Sure. Huang Feng paused for a while after speaking, and then changed his tune. Shui, that little rabbit, she has never eaten people, she is a good goblin, she shouldn't just die like this. Lingji Bodhisattva's voice came from behind him. Are you talking about this one in my hand? Huang Feng hurriedly looked back, and saw Lingji Bodhisattva holding a snow-white rabbit in his arms. He looked at her madly, with a long-lost smile on his face. After leaving Wangfangling, Zhang Yang and his group have been walking for a long time. From summer to autumn, the weather is gradually getting cooler. Zhang Yang sneezed and then scolded. The cassock that Lingji gave me is a copycat, it's not frost-resistant at all. Wukong said, be content, bald donkey, it would be nice if you had clothes to wear. At that time, he ran towards me shirtless. If I hadn't saved you some face, my grandson would have kicked you away. Zhang Yang also shouted at him, don't call me a bald donkey, no big or small, remember that I am the commander-in-chief of the learning team, the highest commander, understand? After listening to him, Wukong took off the golden hoop from his head, threw it on Zhang Yang's head, and then read the hooping spell. Baji looked at Zhang Yang, whose face was covered in blood, shook his head and sighed. Alas, if there were no gods secretly protecting Master's body, or he would have been chanted to death by Brother Monkey's spell. Zhang Yang no longer competes with Wukong. He knows that he can't beat the stinky monkey, so he can only swallow his anger. Speaking of this white dragon horse, Zhang Yang has hardly ridden him since he was kicked by Zhang Yang last time. It seems that this is a good thing. In fact, Bai Longma is also afraid. What if Zhang Yang says he doesn't want him? Then how could he find his sister Ao Shui? At the time, his father, the King of South Blue, and the Dragon King of South Blue, designed him to deliberately smash the Night Pearl that the Jade Emperor rewarded West Blue, and then let the King of South Blue go to intercede with the neighbor Guanyin. It was so hard for him to join this brigade. The purpose is to make the dragons able to. There was a promising man who was appointed an official by God. But now, whether it's the efforts of the father and the king, or his own purpose, they are all about to be shattered, and Bai Longma decided to restore his image in Zhang Yang's heart. So one night, when Zhang Yang got up in the middle of the night to have diarrhea, and ran to squat in the depths of the woods, the white dragon horse bit the rope and quietly followed behind him. Chapter 463. The first time I met Sha Laosin. The weather has been relatively cold in the past 2 days, and Zhang Yang has diarrhea. When he found a weed with no one and was about to pour out 1,000 miles, just when he took off his pants, he heard a movement behind him. Zhang Yang looked back and saw that it was a white dragon horse, raised his trousers and asked, "What are you doing here?" Bai Longma said with a smile, "Master, I want to talk to you sometimes, but the senior brother and the second senior brother are both here. I'm embarrassed. I'll sneak over to chat with you at this time." Zhang Yang's stomach was really about to die. He tightened his butt and said in pain, "I'll listen to you when I finish the big thing in front of me." Bai Longma nodded. "Then master, please solve it first, I'll wait here." Zhang Yang shouted angrily, "Go further, I'm going to shit." Bai Longma took a few steps back and said, "Okay master, let's start." Zhang Yang roared, "Go further." Bai Longma hid under a tree and asked, "Is it okay here?" Zhang Yang picked up a stone and threw it over, scolding, "Bastard, go further." Bai Longma hurriedly took many steps back, but not only did he return to the original spot, but he also accidentally stepped on Wukong's nose. Wukong got up, unable to wipe his mouth full of nosebleeds, and asked, "Are you tired of living?" Bai Longma still has some confidence in front of Wukong. He is also the third prince of West Blue, so he said stubbornly, "I'm sorry." Although the tone was weird, Wukong didn't intend to pursue it, so he just lay down. There is no moon tonight. Baji slept to death. Bai Longma had to wait alone for Zhang Yang to come back, but the time passed by every minute, that is, the time to give birth to a child was all. Bai Longma was a little anxious, and it was about to dawn. He got into the woods again to find Zhang Yang. When Zhang Yang saw the white dragon horse running over again, he cursed from a distance, "Idiot, what are you doing here?" Bai Longma looked aggrieved. "Master, what happened to you? I've been squatting there for so long, I'm worried about you." It's not what happened to Zhang Yang, it's just that he hasn't had a flight for a long time. He stays with a monkey, a pig, and a horse all day. He is worried that he will bend sooner or later, so in order to try his own weather the little brother was frightened by Zen Master Wu Chao and left behind sequelae. He went to the woods to test it twice. As a result, he could not stop after a while. Seeing Zhang Yang's bad face, Bai Longma walked towards him, and Zhang Yang hurriedly stopped him. "Don't come here." "Stop." Bai Longma asked, "Master, what's the matter with you?" Zhang Yang roared, "If you have something to say, just say it, and don't come here anyway." So Bai Longma talked about his thoughts and began to apologize to Zhang Yang, hoping that Zhang Yang would forgive him. Zhang Yang asked suspiciously, "Just for this?" Bai Longma nodded and said, "I didn't save Master before because I didn't expect that there would be an illusion in the desert of yellow sand. I've seen your skills, Master, who can hurt you is a normal little monster. So I hope you can forgive me. Apprentice, no matter what danger I encounter in the future, I will definitely rush to the front." Zhang Yang shook his head. "You don't need to rush in front, you can just be my mount, even if it is dangerous and I am captured by the monster. You should stay where you are, with you brother monkey and brother pig, you don't need to take action." Bai Longma asked, "Does Master think I'm weak?" Zhang Yang said, "You are indeed weak, so just be a horse honestly. Originally, Guanyin's duty to you was to carry me to the west, and you didn't let you protect me or anything." Bai Longma asked, "Then why didn't you ride me for a while?" Zhang Yang explained helplessly. The weather has been dry and cold these 2 days. My chrysanthemum is on fire and it hurts. If I sit on the horse again, I'm afraid that the chrysanthemum will be damaged. Do you understand? The chrysanthemum is damaged, the ground is injured, and your shadow is constantly being cut. Bai Longma was relieved now and heaved a sigh of relief. Since master means this, then I can honestly be a white horse. Zhang Yang nodded. That's right, you can go, I'll be done right away. After the white dragon horse left, Zhang Yang was about to lift himself up again, but before he even started, he heard Wukong's faint voice from overhead. Bald donkey, you have broken your precept. Ah, I want to eat monkey brains. On the second day, Zhang Yang didn't have the heart to talk to Wukong at all. This guy peeked at himself and jerked off last night. Wukong, on the other hand, put his mouth on Baji's ear from time to time, whispering in a whisper, causing Baji to laugh, and from time to time he would look back at Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang was impatient with them, and angrily shook off them and walked forward alone, but he was blocked by a big river before he could go far. There is a stone tablet on the bank with 3 big characters, Liusha River, inscribed in seal script, and there are several lines of small characters below it, which reads, 800 quicksand boundaries, 3000 weak water depths, goose feathers can't float, reed flowers sink to the bottom. Zhang Yang knew where this place was when he saw Liusha River. This is where Sha Wujing was, his 3 simple and obedient apprentices. Thinking of this, Zhang Yang burst into tears. A monkey refused to accept anyone, and now he is still pulling Baji to make fun of himself. Beilongma has decided to be an honest horse, and now only this Sha Wujing is his good apprentice. When Zhang Yang was full of emotion, a strong man jumped out of the quicksand river in front of him, and Zhang Yang shouted, "My dear Mr. Sha. I finally waited for you, fortunately I didn't give up, happiness came." Before finishing singing, I saw Sha Laosin raised his shovel and smashed it at Zhang Yang. The excited expression on Zhang Yang's face gradually dimmed, and he was used to it. All 3 of his apprentices would kill him when they appeared on the stage. If they didn't kill him, he was embarrassed to say that they were protecting the people who learned the scriptures. Unsurprisingly, the shovel hit Zhang Yang's golden hoop, and Sha Laosan was surprised, and retreated to the surface of the water, scolding Zhang Yang, "Where is the evildoer, dare to commit evil in my Liusha River?" After hearing this, Zhang Yang became angry and scolded, "Take a good look at your mother, who looks like a monster." After scolding, he calmed down and asked, "Are you a roller-blind admiral? Did Guanyin make you waiting for a scripture learner to come? Do you want to be his apprentice? If so, come over and kowtow 3 times." After listening to it, Sha Laosin was stunned for a long time, and then pricked up his ears and pretended not to hear. "What are you talking about? The wind is too strong, I can't hear it." Zhang Yang didn't understand what the hell he was doing, so he shouted again, "Did you roll up the curtain for the Jade Emperor? Guanyin asked you to wait here for a monk to learn from the scriptures." Sha Laosin turned his ears on the other side and asked, "The waves are too big, I can't hear them." Zhang Yang nodded. He knew that this was another person who was unwilling to learn scriptures, and was trying to find fault in a different way. That being the case, that publicity is also welcome. Chapter 464, Sha Laosin. Zhang Yang took a deep breath, turned around and shouted, "My unruly monkey and naive pig, come here to meet your 3rd junior brother, and by the way, tell him what happens if you don't obey." Wukong and Baji had already got out of the woods at this time and came to the bank of the Liusha River. When they saw Zhang Yang and the big man standing on the river, they applauded. Seeing this, Zhang Yang scolded, "2 people with no conscience, didn't you hear what I said? Go and teach Sha Laosin a lesson and ask him to take us across the river obediently. This is weak water, and no one can pass it." Baji shook his head and said, "Master, you are so powerful, why don't you go by yourself?" Zhang Yang said, "You still know that I'm your master. Did you let your master go out on his own? What's the use of the 2 of you if you let me go out to fight a monster? I'm doing charity and opening a zoo." Just after Zhang Yang finished shouting, he heard movement behind him, he hurriedly turned around, saw the person in front of him and asked, "Which one are you? What are you doing?" Sha Laosin knelt on the ground, kowtowed 3 times, and said, "Master is on top, please accept me." I saw Sha Laosin's messy hair was also shaved, and he changed into clean clothes, and he became very decent. No wonder Zhang Yang couldn't recognize him, but his attitude was 108,000 miles away. Zhang Yang carefully asked, "Why did you suddenly take medicine? Is it over so early? Come on, you hit me with a shovel just now, how do you want to solve it?" Sha Lao San's eyes rolled around, and then said, "Everything is obeyed by master." Zhang Yang is watching Sha Lao San's eyes roll around. He doesn't look like a good person, his inner activity is too obvious. Soon he thought that Sha Laosin suddenly changed his attitude when he saw Wukong and Baji coming over. Could it be that he was afraid of them both? Zhang Yang looked at Sha Laosin, and saw the 9 human skulls on his neck, some of which were damaged. He asked, "Whose heads are these?" Sha Laosin thought about it and said, "In summer, there are always naughty children who come to swim, and then drown. The corpses are gradually soaked in blisters, and then I pick up their skulls, strung them into necklaces, and don't wear them. Just kidding, master, if you like it, I will give it to you." He took off the necklace and handed it to Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang looked at the human head necklace in his hand, and the hair on his back stood up. This is clearly the skull of an adult. Why did Sha Laosin lie? He looked at Sha Laosin's half-smiley expression, and suddenly thought of this chapter in Journey to the West. These 9 skulls of Sha Laosin seem to be the first 9 reincarnations of Jin Chanzi. Zhang Yang was so frightened that he threw the head necklace on the ground. Seeing this, Sha Laosin hurriedly picked it up and asked, "Does master not like this? Then I will just throw it away." After speaking, he threw the necklace into the water. Inside, the 9 heads did not sink, and all floated on the surface of the quicksand river. Sure enough, it is the 9 reincarnations of Jin Chanzi. This quicksand river is weak water, and even the goose feathers will sink. The fact that the skull did not sink is enough to prove this. Zhang Yang couldn't understand, since Sha Laosin was waiting for the scriptures here under the order of Guanyin, why did he kill the first 9 scriptures again and again? Just when Zhang Yang was lost in thought, Baji came over and said to Sha Laosin, "Crocodile, you will be our junior brother from now on, and the one over there is Monkey King, our senior brother." Sha Laosin stared at Wukong, suddenly ran in front of him, and said with a strange expression, "Hello, senior brother." Wukong noticed from the very beginning that something was wrong with this junior brother. He ignored him, but walked to the bank of the Liusha River and looked at the big river, thinking about how to cross it. Baji warm-hearted Ly went to talk to Sha Laosin. Zhang Yang and Wukong stood side by side. He asked, "Monkey, do you feel something is wrong?" Wukong said, "Don't think too much about it. Anyway, no one can break your cover. The task now is how to cross this river." Zhang Yang asked, "It's so simple, do you still want to think about it? You can fly over with me on your back. If you want me to tell me to fly directly to Leiyin Temple, let's get the scriptures and divide our luggage early. You can go back to Wagwo Mountain. I went to the daughter country, Baji and Chang'e met, what a happy ending." Wu glanced at him blankly and said, "You are a mortal body, and you are as heavy as Mount Tai. There is no way to carry you up and fly. If you want to cross this weak water, you have to rely on him." Zhang Yang looked back at the 3rd son of Sha, and found that he was also staring at him excitedly, and he hurriedly turned around and said, "I always feel that he looks at me with panic, and it feels like he is going to eat me up." Quote. Wukong turned to stare at Zhang Yang and asked, "Then what do you think I look at you?" Zhang Yang also stared into his eyes. After looking at it for a long time, he said, "I'm really a talent." After speaking, he turned around and walked towards Sha Laosin. "Crocodile, how will this quicksand river get there?" Zhang Yang asked. "If you have a way, we won't go to the gods for help. Your senior brother once made a lot of trouble in the heavenly palace, and now it's a little embarrassing to ask someone to do something." The monk Sand seemed to be waiting for Zhang Yang to ask him this, and he hurriedly replied, Master, who has a way, is the 9 skulls, they can float on the quicksand river, as long as the 9 skulls are made larger, they can be used as boats. Zhang Yang nodded and said, if that's the case, monkey, you pick up that skull. Wukong was about to fly over, but the sand monk ran in front of him and stopped him, saying, Senior brother, let me do this kind of trivial thing. Wukong still ignored him and turned around and walked back. Seeing that his attitude towards Crocodile was not good, Baji asked, Brother Monkey, are you being too indifferent to others? After all, he is our junior brother. Wukong said, don't you know that back then my old grandson could almost kill that bastard Jade Emperor with a stick? It was this mentally retarded person who threw the glass cup over and made my stick miss. Baji was also dissatisfied with the Jade Emperor. He guessed that it was the Jade Emperor's revenge for casting the wrong pig fetus, so he didn't say anything. Zhang Yang listened to Wukong's tone, as if he was still a little dissatisfied with the Jade Emperor, but he didn't dare to judge anything. After all, he really didn't know what happened 500 years ago. Sand Monk came to the middle of the quicksand river in front of everyone's eyes, turned his back to Zhang Yang and others. He picked up the skull necklace, then tore off the necklace expressionlessly, and then tied a knot that looked very weak, and then he turned his head, smiled and said, Master, I got it, so I'll bring it here. Zhang Yang nodded at Monk Sha, and then said to Wukong and Baji, I always feel that something is wrong, you should be careful in a while, don't let him do any little tricks. Chapter 465, Unexpectedly. Sand Monk came to the shore with the skull necklace, and then used a spell to enlarge the necklace, forming a ring-like swimming ring that could float on the quicksand river. Zhang Yang looked uncomfortable. This shows that half of his body is going to be soaked in water. He said that he had diarrhea for the past 2 days, and his body could not touch the water, so Sha Seng had to make his skull smaller so that Zhang Yang's butt could just sit on it, as long as he keep your legs upright to keep your body from getting wet. With the help of Baji, Zhang Yang sat on the top, quite stable, so he prepared to cross the Liusha River like this. Wukong, Baji, Sha Seng and Bai Longma all flew in the air. Zhang Yang was alone on the water. The strange thing was that the Liusha River, which had been calm before, suddenly became turbulent. Zhang Yang staggered, and he nervously clasped it with his hands. The orbital part of the skull to prevent itself from falling off. Just when the group reached the water in the middle of the quicksand river, the line attached to the skull swimming ring on which Zhang Yang was sitting suddenly broke, and he fell into the river without warning and sank to the bottom. He held his breath with difficulty, and saw that Wukong and Sha Seng were fighting above the water, and Sha Seng also dived into the quicksand river, stretched out his hand and grabbed it towards Zhang Yang, with a strange smile on his face. Is that really the case? Sha Seng also came to kill himself, Zhang Yang thought. Wukong has been staring at Monk Sand all the way. He didn't expect it to be what happened on the skull necklace. When he confronted Monk Sand, he took out a shovel and attacked Monk, and then quickly got into the water. Seeing that the shadow of Zhang Yang was gradually lost under the water, Bajia asked anxiously, Brother Monkey, Master is a mortal body, so he won't be able to last long in this water. Wukong was also a little anxious. He said to Baji, my old grandson doesn't know water. If you go down alone, you have to save the bald donkey and guard against the sand monk. How can this be good? At this time, the little white dragon on the side said, Don't worry, senior brother, although master let me be a white horse with peace of mind, but now this emergency situation, I can't stand by and let me go into the water with the second senior brother to help him rescue. Master. This is the only way to go now. Wukong nodded, took out a gold hoop the size of an embroidery needle from his ear, and held it in his hand, saying, The 2 of you will go down, one person to save the master, and the other to lead the monk Sha. Come up, my old grandson will break his head with a stick. Baji and Xiaobailong agreed and went into the water one after another. When they were underwater, they understood why this river was called Liusha River, because the bottom of the water was almost all silt, and just walking around could make the water turbid. Fortunately, Baji used to be the Marshal of Tianping in charge of the Tianhe Navy, and Xiao Bailong was the third prince of West Blue. The two of them had excellent water skills, and they didn't find it difficult in the water. Soon, they saw Zhang Yang struggling in the mud, and Sand Monk who was holding a shovel next to him and was about to hit him on the head. Seeing this, Xiao Bailong hurriedly twisted his body and turned into Jackie Chan and swam over. He was very fast in the water, and almost instantly came to Sand Monk's side, and then knocked him away with his dragon horn. At the same time, Baji arrived later. He reached out and pulled Zhang Yang, who was half dead, and dragged him out of the mud, and then went upstream to the water. After seeing Baji and Zhang Yang go out, Xiao Bailong didn't want to fight, and he also flew out quickly. After Wukong watched them all come out, without waiting for the Sand Monk to show up, he directly stretched the golden hoop stick and inserted it into the river, stirring it all, turning the entire quicksand river into black. Finally, he saw Sha Seng floating up unconscious. Wukong was about to kill him with a stick, but heard a familiar voice coming from above his head. "Look, I came so late, how did you guys get like this?" It turned out to be Guanyin Bodhisattva. She figured that Zhang Yang had already arrived at Liusha River, so she thought of coming over to help them recognize their master and apprentice, but looking at the scene in front of her, Zhang Yang was lying on the ground and being given artificial respiration by Baji, while Sha Seng was lying in the river. Rolling her eyes, she felt helpless. When Wukong saw it was her, he asked, "Bodhisattva, is this Sand Monk you also sent to protect the bald donkey?" Guanyin said, "Yes, how did you make him look like this?" Wukong explained what happened just now in an angry manner, and she heard the sweat on Guanyin's forehead. She wiped the sweat and said, "You must have misunderstood, and the monk Sha was indeed sent by me to protect the person who took the scriptures. I said just now, maybe he saw the master fall, did he want to go into the water to save him?" Wukong scolded, "Fart, how can you attack me with weapons when you go into the water to save people?" At this time, Xiao Bailong also said, "That's right, after I got into the water, I clearly saw him attacking Master with a shovel, and he even fought with me." Guanyin Bodhisattva wiped his sweat again and said, "Let's wake the two of them up first, and then ask them to find out." After speaking, Guanyin took out the willow branch in the suet jade vase in his hand, and then placed the willow branch on the willow branch. The drops of water were first sprinkled on the Sand Monk who was closest to her. Sand Monk gradually regained his senses and came to his senses. He got up and shouted, "Bald donkey! I won't be a roller-blind admiral if I don't skin you cramps." Guanyin wiped the sweat from his forehead again and said quickly, "Next is your master, don't worry." When Zhang Yang also woke up and saw Guanyin Bodhisattva also, he asked, "I said, Bodhisattva, I don't want this Sand Monk, and I wanted to kill me not long after I met him. It's not lack of heart." When Guanyin heard this, it was troublesome. She floated to Zhang Yang's side and whispered in his ear, "This monk Sha is the person recommended by the Jade Emperor to me, I can't refuse it. You also know that the relationship between the Tathagata Buddha and the Jade Emperor is somewhat delicate, and it is unclear what the truth is. If you send the shaman back like this, where will the Jade Emperor's face be put?" Although Zhang Yang thinks it makes sense, he can't keep such a person who wants to kill him at any time by his side. He asked, "Why does this monk Sand hold so much grudge against me? Is he with Jin Chanzi? There is some misunderstanding." Guanyin Bodhisattva pinched her fingers, and events within 500 years flashed in front of her like a movie. After she carefully stroked it, she shook her head and said, "I really don't think so. This monk Sha was originally the roller shutter of the heavenly palace. Admiral, who often rolled up the door curtain for him by the Jade Emperor's side, was later demoted by the Jade Emperor into the quicksand river and became a monster because he shattered the glass cup. It is also very pitiful to let lightning strike him 10 times every day and pierce his heart 10 times with 10,000 swords." Of course, Guanyin Bodhisattva said it is one thing, and Zhang Yang believes it is another matter. This Sand Monk eats the same body shape as Dwayne Johnson. No matter how you look at it, he doesn't look like a punished person. Zhang Yang still has nothing to do with him. Not feeling good. Chapter 466. The official collection of the learning team. Guanyin reassured Zhang Yang that with Wukong, Baji and Xiaobailong around, Sha Seng couldn't hurt him. As long as you get to the Western Heaven and send the monk Sha, you are done. It's hard for Zhang Yang to say anything, because these are all predetermined positions, destined from the beginning, and he can only execute them according to the above meaning. After Guanyin finished speaking, he left. Zhang Yang whispered a few words in Wukong's ear. Wukong nodded, took the golden hoop on his head and threw it on Sha Seng's head. Monk Sha tried hard to take it for a long time, but failed to take it off. He stared at his big black eyes and asked, Bimoan, you are courting death. This sentence shocked several people present. I don't know whether Sha Seng is really stupid or eager to die. Where did he get the courage to say Wukong like this? Wukong's eyes were red again. Baji had seen how terrifying Wukong was when he went mad, so he didn't plan to stop him. He could only pray that Monk Sha would not be beaten to death. Wukong didn't use violence this time, but chanted the hooping mantra, and the golden hoop on Sand Monk's head began to shrink, causing him to have a splitting headache and fell to the ground, twitching. Wukong didn't intend to kill him. He stopped after reading for a while, but Sha Seng struggled a few times on the ground like a zombie, tilted his head and stared at him and said, Bimoan, you are courting death. Now it became clear to Zhang Yang that it wasn't that Monk's sand was bloody, but that his mind was full of water. He stopped Wukong, who had already committed murder, and said to him, Monkey calms down, his brain is broken. He used to roll up the curtains every day in the sky, and it made him doubt life, and his brain is broken. You give him make a silent spell so he can't speak. Wukong took out a gold hoop stick the size of an embroidery needle from his ear, made a line, and walked to the sand monk. After a while, he saw that the sand monk's mouth was sewn up, and the mouth was full of blood. Although it is a bit unbearable to look directly at it, the team of learning from the scriptures is a real collection so far. A powerful monkey, a reliable pig, a tall, rich and handsome horse, and a savage who is always thinking about killing Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang looked at his apprentices and said, since everyone is here, let me arrange the order for you. Wukong is the senior brother, Baji is the second senior brother, Xiaobailong is the third senior brother, Sha Seng. You can lead the horse to me. Okay, then let's go, towards the daughter country. No, towards Laiyan Temple going. The four master and apprentice continued to embark on the road of learning scriptures. When crossing the Liusha River, Wukong randomly selected a skull to enlarge, and then let Zhang Yang sit on it. He and Baji flew and supported them. The Liusha River. After crossing the river, the 9 skulls floating on the quicksand river all sank to the bottom of the river in a blink of an eye and disappeared. The group walked for a while. Zhang Yang observed Sha Seng secretly for a long time, and found that since his mouth was sewn up by Wukong, he seemed to have blocked his IQ in his mind, and he was not as mentally retarded as before. After the fire of Zhang's ass subsided, he began to sit on the horse's back. Baji led the horse to the closest to him, and after there were more people, more clothes were changed, so they made 2 wooden boxes. Put the food guy, clothes, underwear, socks, etc. in it, let the sand monk carry it. Wukong is always at the forefront, he is the first to know if there is any danger, and he can avoid a lot of unnecessary troubles, what? Jackals, tigers, leopards, etc. Of course, during this period, Sha Seng still did some outrageous things, such as sneak attacking Zhang Yang from behind when he was not paying attention, but because of the protection of the golden bell, he couldn't hurt him either. Everyone was used to it. At first, they looked back at him, but later they took him less and less seriously. No matter how much he messed around, no one paid him any attention. Occasionally, Zhang Yang would talk to Sha Seng and ask him why he had an opinion on him. Sha Seng couldn't say anything and could only stare at Zhang Yang with 2 big eyes, and Zhang Yang could only walk away boringly, because those eyes were already there. Told him, bald donkey, you are courting death. Regardless of why Sha Seng hated Zhang Yang so much, their group had already moved from the fall season to the late autumn season. The mountains were red and the maple leaves were all over the ground, and they came to a village in a blink of an eye. Zhang Yang, who had not seen people for a long time, hurriedly got off his horse and ran to the village. Baji looked at it and shook his head. Master is going to break the precept again. Relapse is a must. During this period of time, I have been eating wild fruits and drinking raw water. Zhang Yang hasn't cooked meat for a long time. Occasionally, I beat a turtle dove to roast it, but it doesn't taste good without salt. Now that there are people smoking, that Zhang Yang has to make up for it. Looking back on his best meal, it was when he was in Gao Laozhuang. When Zhang Yang came to the door, she happened to bump into a half-old lady who came out. She saw a monk rushing to the house in a panic, and she shouted sharply, "Where's the bald donkey, dare to break into the widow's house without authorization?" Zhang Yang scolded, "You old lady, can you keep your mouth clean? What a bald donkey! I came from the Tang dynasty in the east, and I went to the west to worship Buddha and ask for scriptures. Just go in and eat fast." Quote. Seeing the bald donkey tone, the woman gave him a slap, then turned and left, closing the door with force. Zhang Yang is no longer the Zhang Yang he used to be. He just kicked his foot like that, the door was kicked to pieces, and then swaggered into the yard, and said to the woman fiercely, "Good wine, good food, give it to me." At the previous table, chickens, ducks, fish, cattle and sheep, each variation of the method will be different for me, and it is not allowed to repeat. The best daughters, Hong and Zhu Yeqing, came to serve 3 pots. In addition, 3 good guest rooms are prepared. My little brother and I have to rest, and it is hard to say how long we will stay there. The woman was frightened by Zhang Yang's vicious tone and wanted to leave in a hurry, but was caught by Zhang Yang and asked, "By the way, what are you doing here, why are you alone?" The woman hurriedly replied, "Honest man, spare your life, this is the boundary of Xiniuhezhou, the little woman's maiden name is Jia, her husband's family name is Mo, my father-in-law and mother-in-law died early, and my husband also died unfortunately, I have no children under my knees, only 3 beautiful-looking Ruhua's daughter, there are thousands of acres of fertile land at home, and the family is entangled. My family has too much money. If I remarry, I can't bear it, so I'll recruit son-in-law for my 3 daughters here. If anyone enters my house, the property will be his." After listening to Zhang Yang, he thought that something was wrong, and he asked, "Have I asked you so much?" The answer is irrelevant. You are tempting me to be your son-in-law, do you know? I am a holy monk of the Tang dynasty, can't I resist this temptation? I advise you to call your 3 daughters quickly, and I will consecrate them, so that your family can quickly come to your son-in-law, which is regarded as doing good deeds. Chapter 467. Zhang Yang will not leave. After the woman left, Wukong and others also walked in, and they were not surprised when they saw the door that was kicked to pieces. When the woman came to the yard with her 3 daughters, Zhang Yang saw that her 3 daughters' eyes were about to pop out. He stepped forward to hold the woman's hand, and said firmly, "Mother-in-law, your 3 daughters are really goddesses, beautiful as flowers, they are perfect for me, why don't you let me stay and be the man of your family, why do you hold up the sky?" Before the woman could speak, Wukong grabbed Zhang Yang by the collar and pulled him back. Then he walked up to the woman and said, "Do you have a room? We want to spend the night here tonight." The woman saw that Wukong looked like a monkey, and he was not a good person. Compared with the bald donkey just now, she was more intimidating. She could only nod and said, "There are rooms, but you can't live in vain." Baji tied the horse and came back and asked, "How do you say this?" The woman replied, "My 3 daughters, the eldest daughter is 20 years old this year, her name is Junjun, the second daughter is 18 years old, her name is Ai, and the third daughter is 16 years old, her name is Lian, and they are all beautiful and delicious. I need a man to be the backbone of my family, and at least one of you must stay, otherwise even if you kill me, you won't be allowed to spend the night here." Wukong glanced at the 3 daughters behind the woman. They all lowered their heads, quietly glanced at Wukong, did not dare to talk much. Wukong waved his hand, turned around and pulled Zhang Yang out. "No, let's go out for the night, the big deal is to hold Baji for the night." After saying that, Zhang Yang was not happy anymore. he broke free from Wukong's hands and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? How embarrassed are you making Baji in this wild country?" Seeing that Zhang Yang wanted to stay, the woman hurriedly invited him into the room. "Holy monk, please come with me." She brought Zhang Yang into the room, and asked her 3 daughters to wait in their dormitory, and finally arranged for Wukong and the others. After leaving the room, he returned to the room where Zhang Yang was. Zhang Yang asked, "Mother-in-law, I am an eminent monk, so my character is absolutely trustworthy. I am not marrying your daughter for anything else. I am very simple. Just tell me, when will I get married?" Seeing his anxious look, the woman smiled and said, "It's not that easy for you to get married. Right now I have 3 daughters, but you only have one person. Who do you think should marry you?" Zhang Yang said, "Then I will marry the 3 together, so I still have some energy." The woman thought for a while, then said, "Well, I think your 3 apprentices don't want you to stay, so it's better to give you 1 night to persuade them." He had no choice but to think about it in the corridor after Zhang Yang left the room. How could he convince his 3 apprentices? In fact, Guanyin asked him to study scriptures. To be honest, he didn't want to go that much. His promise to study scriptures was nothing more than rushing towards the gate of time and space that even existed or not existed. But since he stayed in this journey to the west for a while, he thought it would be good to stay here. People in ancient times used rouge and gouache for their makeup and makeup. Unlike modern people, who have a thick layer of powder on their faces, machine guns can't make a hole, and sometimes they have to bring a blind date. Apply makeup remover. Otherwise, you are alone before you get married, and then you are too alone after you get married. The skin of ancient beauties is very good. There is no radiation from mobile phones and computers, so they look white and tender, and they can be squeezed out of water. Thinking about Zhang Yang, they came to the place where Wukong and the others were resting, pushed the door and went in. All 3 of them turned their heads to look at Zhang Yang. Zhang Yang glanced at them, then looked at the environment of the room, and deliberately changed the subject. "Isn't the 3 rooms agreed? It's too small, I'll go to them to judge." Before he could turn around, Wukong pulled him back and pressed him onto the chair. "Bald donkey, has your head not hurt in the past 2 days?" Wukong said, "A monk still dares to marry a wife, so that people won't laugh out loud." "You see what you said is going too far." Zhang Yang stood up, invited Wukong to the chair, and said to him, "First of all, I'm really not a monk, and the second is the task of Monk Tang, who killed Monk Tang. It's not me. Monkey, I think you should grow up and know how to take responsibility on your shoulders and become an upstanding monkey." Wukong saw that he was speaking in an unclear manner, and asked, "Tell me the point." Zhang Yang said, "The Tang monk you killed, you have to go to get scriptures for him. I want to stay." As soon as these words came out, both Wukong and Baji were surprised. They originally wanted to protect Zhang Yang from going to the west to learn scriptures. Now that Zhang Yang can't say anything, can they still go? Baji was the first to refuse and said, "Master, you have to think about it clearly. If you become a Buddha, you will live on forever. If you marry a wife and have children here, they will be gone in a few decades. You have to choose between the pros and cons." "A moment." Zhang Yang said in turn, "My infatuated husband, you are a person with Chang'e, born of a monkey stone, and Sha Seng is mentally retarded. Is it wrong for a teacher to want to marry a wife now?" Baji asked, "Then what do you say? You stay and we go to learn the scriptures." Zhang Yang snapped his fingers, then extended his thumb to Baji. "Zuer is very smart, that's what he planned. This time, I might marry 3 at a time. Thinking about the happy life in the future, I can't help but get a nosebleed. I am a person who is indifferent to fame and fortune. Becoming a Buddha means nothing to me, and longevity without emotions and desires is also a pain, so I decided to stay." What Baji wanted to say was stopped by Wukong. "Okay, idiot, we've been with you for so long, it's not too late for us to leave after the bald donkey gets married." Zhang Yang patted Wukong on the back and said, "My good monkey, you still understand the heart of being a teacher." Later, after everyone had dinner, Zhang and his disciples lived separately. His room was very close to the woman, and next to it were the rooms of his 3 daughters. At night, Wukong did not fall asleep. He secretly went out of the room and came to the door of the eldest daughter Junjun. He turned into a cloud of smoke and got into the house, and when he saw that Junjun was sleeping, he walked up to him and pulled the golden cudgel out of his ear. Since Zhang was fascinated by ghosts, what Wukong thought was to cut the weeds and eradicate the roots. After breaking the thoughts of the bald donkey, he would naturally be able to learn scriptures. Just when Wukong raised the golden cudgel to hit Junjun's head, although Junjun closed her eyes, she suddenly opened her mouth to speak. "Monkey King, don't be rude." Wukong sneered. "I knew there were ghosts. Say, who are you?" Junjun opened her eyes and sat up without revealing her true form. She smiled and said, "I have a relationship with your master. If you want to be ranked, you have to call me uncle." Chapter 468, The Unspeakable Mission. Hearing what she said, Wukong immediately knew who was coming. He put down his stick and said, "My old grandson doesn't have a master, so I came here to tell you, don't do any tricks, and let us go west tomorrow." Junjun said with a smile, "Son Wukong, what did you see when you returned to Wagwo Mountain from the foot of Wuji Mountain?" Wukong was obviously startled, but he still pretended to be calm and said, "Is it related to you?" Junjun's expression no longer showed a smile. She said very seriously, "Your master is no longer in the 3 realms. As his apprentice, don't you want to avenge him?" This sentence is like a bolt from the blue hitting Wukong's head. He is very clear about the meaning of not being in the 3 realms. However, the person in front of him has an extremely high cultivation base, and there is no reason to lie to him, but he still can't figure out who it is. Can you have such an ability to make master disappear from the 3 realms? Soon, a familiar image flashed in front of his eyes. It was the image of Jin Chanzi eradicating himself from the 3 realms when he finally explained the freedom he sought. Could it be that master, like Jin Chanzi, did it himself? That Jin Chanzi was originally the 2nd disciple of Tathagata Buddha, and later because of some he dozed off at the Buddhist chanting conference. Therefore, he was demoted to a mortal by the Tathagata, and let him experience the suffering of reincarnation in 10 lifetimes. But there is one very important thing Wukong doesn't know. Is Jin Chanzi really hated by Buddha just because he dozed off? What kind of unknown things are hidden between them? The golden cicada is gone, so this matter becomes a mystery. However, Wukong vaguely felt that Jin Chanzi had a relationship with his master, and the friendship was not shallow. Really saw Wukong frowning in thought, and then asked another question. "What did your master say to you before he drove you away?" Wukong called in truthfully. He said that I will definitely cause trouble in the future. If anyone asks about my master, he cannot mention his name. Junjun nodded and continued to ask. "Then he knew that you would cause trouble. Why didn't he take precautions in advance and teach you to be a good person, but asked you not to mention his name?" Wukong was puzzled and shook his head silently. Junjun said, "He just sent you, the monkey, to make trouble in the heavenly palace and disturb the heavenly court." A gleam of light flashed in Wukong's eyes, and it quickly dimmed again. The words of the person in front of him were too sensitive. Wukong didn't know whether he should continue to take her words, and he was vaguely worried. Who knows, what Junjun said next is what really shocked Wukong. "Since the words are clear, I will say it directly. Your master is a disciple of the ancestor of Hun Kun, and his name is the Quasi-Taoist. In addition, the Tathagata once called the Taoist to lead, and he is also a disciple of the ancestor of Hun Kun. One changed his name to Tathagata Buddha in the West and practiced Buddhism, and the other lived in seclusion in Shinyuhajo and changed his name to Bodhi Master." Quote. When Wukong heard this, he didn't have the heart to listen anymore. He waved his hand and said, "What are you going to say? Don't tell me these things that are not true or false. I have already converted to my Buddha." Hearing Wukong say this, Junjun's expression changed slightly, and a sad look appeared in her eyes. "Originally from Taoism, but you want to convert to Buddhism, no matter what. you have already been expelled from the school by Bodhi Patriarch, no longer if you are a Taoist disciple, just go with you. Quote. Before leaving, Wukong asked, what is your purpose here? Junjun lied on the bed, closed his eyes and said, tell you these things, so that you know what to do in the future. Remember, you have been expelled from the teacher's door. After returning to the room, Wukong did not see Baji, but when he was about to go out to find him, he saw that Baji just came back. Wukong asked, where have you been? Baji obviously had something on his mind, but he didn't plan to tell Wukong, so he explained, Brother Monkey, I just don't trust Master, so I went to see him. Wukong asked again, what happened to the bald donkey? Baji hesitantly said, it's good, I'm sleeping. They already slept. After he finished speaking, he was about to enter the room, but was stopped by Wukong, so he asked, Brother Monkey, what are you doing? Wukong glanced at the sand monk, cast a spell so that he couldn't hear anything, and said to Baji, back then you told me that your master would not let you say his name, but now you seem to be able to say, _. Baji was very shocked. He didn't know how Wukong knew about this. He hurriedly asked, Brother Monkey, did you go to see someone just now? Then he said something to you. Wukong nodded. I am now 500 years ago. Lao Sun and your teacher went out of the same door. Something was spinning in Baji's eyes. He nodded and said, Senior brother, I had a hunch, but I've always been vigilant against Master's warning. I never knew you. Wukong said, now we can meet, and the Master is no longer there. Baji was heartbroken and said, 500 years ago we were teachers from the same family, and 500 years later we are still brothers. It seems that someone is arranging all this for us. Regarding the Master's revenge, what do you have? Are you going to? Wukong said, I have been expelled from the division, so my grandson has nothing to do with them, so I will do what I need to do, you can rest assured. At this time, Baji said, Brother Monkey, I thought of going with you. I just broke off my relationship with the teacher. You can't let you do this alone. We brothers will come together. Hearing what Baji said, Wukong was very moved, patted him on the shoulder, and said, it really is my brother. But now there is still a more worrying thing, that is Zhang Yang, what should he do? Both Wukong and Baji were so confused. Although Zhang Yang was ordered to learn scriptures in a critical situation, after all, he was not from this world and should not be involved in this dispute. Thinking of this, Wukong said, if that's the case, let the bald donkey stay. We'll be on our way early tomorrow morning, and the monk Sha is obviously someone from a certain sect who came to see us, so we also bring him, so that we won't get caught. Suspected. After the two brothers discussed important matters, they were about to enter the house to rest, but they saw Sha Seng standing behind them, staring at them with wide eyes. The current sand monk, both deaf and dumb, really has no other role than staring. Wukong and Baji kicked him back to the room with one kick, and the two went in and closed the door. The next morning, Zhang Yang opened his eyes and saw that he was sleeping on a wasteland surrounded by overgrown weeds and dense woods. He scratched the mosquito-bitten pimple on his arm and got up with a yawn. He looked around and couldn't figure out how he came to the wilderness. Could it be sleepwalking? But when he thought about it again, the cold sweat broke out, and he was the only one here. Chapter 469, Seeing Lin Xiaoyu Again. After Zhang Yang shouted the names of Wukong and Baji many times, he couldn't get any response. Usually he was surrounded by people, but now he is suddenly left alone, and he still feels empty in his heart. Zhang Yang doesn't know why Wukong and the others suddenly disappeared. The original village here also disappeared overnight. Could it be that something incredible happened last night while he was sleeping? Just when Zhang Yang was at a loss and couldn't tell the direction, he suddenly thought of a way to find the father-in-law, so he stomped his foot hard and shouted that the old man came out, but the time for half a stick of incense passed, and even a ghost was gone. Did not see it. South Blue was taking a bath, and her brows suddenly became tight. She hurriedly pinched her fingers to calculate, only to realize that Zhang Yang was alone in the woods, as if something had happened. She took the jade bottle, took out the willow branch from the bottle, pulled out a willow leaf, and blew on it. The willow leaves slowly evaporated into a cloud of white mist, and finally condensed into a human form, kneeling in front of Guanyin. Guanyin said, "Yer, I don't know why, the apprentice of the person who took the scriptures left him. You go and bring them together, I will come after taking a shower." Yer nodded in agreement, then turned into a gust of breeze and hurried to Hezhou, Xinyu. Zhang Yang in the forest identified the south, east, north, and west through the direction of the sun, and then continued going toward the west. In fact, he blamed himself a little bit because he didn't have enough concentration to learn from the scriptures, so now his daughter-in-law didn't get it, and his apprentice was lost. Just as he sighed and headed west to going, a gust of wind suddenly blew and rolled up the dust. He narrowed his eyes, and when he opened it again, he saw a masked woman wearing a green veil standing in front of him. Zhang Yang took 2 steps back and asked cautiously, "Monster?" Yer didn't answer. He stared at Zhang Yang for a while, then muttered, "You are not Jin Chanzi." When Zhang Yang heard that he wasn't here to find him, he breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Yes, I'm just an ordinary person, wandering around in the woods." There was a hint of sadness in Yer's eyes, and after a while she asked again, "Are you the one who learned the scriptures?" Zhang Yang couldn't escape when he heard this, and quickly explained, "This girl, listen to me, although I also learned from scriptures, but my flesh has no effect of immortality, and I haven't bathed for many days, you take a mouthful of mud." Yer didn't answer his nonsense, but turned around and said while walking, "I'll come, Sun Wukong is talking with Zhenyuan Daxian in the Wuzhuang temple in front, I'll take you there." Where would Zhang Yang be willing? And he didn't know where the girl who was killed halfway came from. Ever since the little rabbit put a knife on his neck, he has been extra careful in everything, because the golden bellhood that Fu Lang gave him is not omnipotent. Yes, there are flaws. Now that his 3 bodyguards, Wukong, Baji and Xiaobailong are not around, he still does not dare to move forward rashly. Yer looked back and saw that Zhang Yang was nowhere to be seen, and went to look for him again. Zhang Yang ran all the way, forgetting what direction to look, until he got out of the woods, ran to the bottom of the mountain, and saw a village. The smoke from the cooking was rising in the village. Zhang Yang smelled the fragrance of rice in the air, and his stomach was croaking. When he came to this village, he was a little stunned. Although it was very lively here and lived and worked in peace and contentment, these villagers were clearly not human. The man selling steamed buns over there has chicken heads, the man selling candied haws here has deer antlers, and the one who is doing acrobatics on the street is actually a monkey. This motherfucker is clearly in a village full of monsters. What? The appearance of humans made these monsters stop their work one after another, and all of them looked at him with strange expressions. Zhang Yang had an idea, wrinkled his face together, and tried to make himself look a little weirder and not look so human. While pretending to be right and walking in, he deliberately said loudly to himself, "Oh, I just ate someone, and my stomach was full." The surrounding demons were booing, and some demons whispered, "It turned out to be a chrysanthemum monster, this can become an essence, the world is really wonderful." Another demon said, "Another one who is not afraid of death has gone out to eat people and returned. Let's see how he dies in a while." Zhang Yang was considered a fool. He turned around twice and felt that it was not appropriate to stay here for a long time, so he turned around and left again. But just after walking a few steps, I heard a strange voice behind me. All the demons shouted in unison, "Miss Auspicious." If you think about it with your toes, you can know that it must be a great person, or a goddess-level person. Zhang Yang ran away, but before he ran out of the village, his legs left the ground, and he was already floating in the air. After fluttering in the air a few times, he really had no choice, and wrinkled his face together again, turned around and said, "Miss Auspicious." But when Zhang Yang saw the woman in front of him clearly, his face stretched out unconsciously, revealing his original face. And the monsters who were kneeling all over the floor began to sigh again. "Oh my God, he is really a human being. Now he is going to be miserable. I don't know if he will be buried alive or hanged." Zhang Yang didn't have the time to listen to the gossip of these villagers. He kept staring at the woman standing in front of him, and countless unfamiliar and familiar images flashed in his mind. She had short hair, and later she looked at Zhang Yang and cried. She cried desperately, and finally disappeared in front of his eyes as a bubble. Zhang Yang rolled up his sleeves, revealing the 3 words on his arms, Lin Xiaoyu. He murmured, "Are you Lin Xiaoyu?" This woman was wearing a red nightgown with sleepy eyes. It was obvious that she had just woken up from sleep. She came out to take a look after she noticed a stranger in the village, but she didn't expect to be a human. But why did he watch himself cry? That's right, Zhang Yang was full of tears. He always felt that he must have done something that was sorry to Lin Xiaoyu, but this person always flashed in his mind, and in the end he never left his face, although he was dressed differently now, but he remembered that face again, and would not admit it wrong. This woman is exactly the same as Lin Xiaoyu. The woman walked up to Zhang Yang, waved her hand to withdraw the spell, and let Zhang Yang land. She held his wrist and carefully observed the 3 words on his arm, but raised her head and asked, "Who are you?" That kind of feeling is very empty. A mysterious woman who is often dreamed by him and occasionally flashes before his eyes, and now appears in front of him, even if he and she don't know anything. Zhang Yang doesn't want to give up. He hugged her, and then burst into tears. "No matter what the reason, I finally found you, and no matter what happened, I want to say, I'm sorry." Chapter 470, Catwoman. The sudden crying and apology, in addition to the surprise of the woman herself, even the monster villagers behind her were also frightened. This strange human being dared to hug their mother-in-law. It was just courting death. However, I don't know if the Empress just woke up or was confused by Zhang Yang's incident. She didn't feel angry or anything, just curious. What is the origin of this bald monk? Zhang Yang still hugged her and cried so much that she didn't want to let go, and even put her feet on her body. The villagers couldn't stand it anymore, so 2 minotaurs came and pulled Zhang Yang away. One of the minotaurs asked, "Mother, what should I do with this human?" Another minotaur came up with an idea. "My lady said that you can't hurt humans, but this human has entered our territory, and if we let him go, he might cause death for us. Why don't you try the black iron machete cast by my family, and cut off his head easily, not 9,008 or 98, just 98 pennies, take home a good knife." The sudden advertisement attracted rotten vegetables and rotten eggs, and someone broke the platform and said, "Niu second. Your family's broken knife can cut off cucumbers and cucumbers. I didn't ask you to refund the money, you still have the face to beat here advertisement." Second Niu was unhappy, and went back. "Ant dog, didn't I tell you that cucumbers are for eating?" At this time, the woman waved her hand, all the demons stopped talking, and the surroundings were silent for a moment. She motioned for the 2 bull demons to let go of Zhang Yang, and then said to him, "Come with me." Zhang Yang wiped away his tears, followed behind the woman, and left in front of everyone's eyes. The 2 came to a house. Although the appearance was no different from an ordinary house, they walked in and saw that there was a universe inside. This is not a house at all, but a cave with candles on the wall, and I don't know where it leads. After walking in, the world here is completely different from the outside world. The woman stopped and turned around and said to him, "I'm not Lin Xiaoyu, and I don't have a name. Everyone here calls me Empress, so you can call me Catgirl." Zhang Yang nodded and said, "I can probably guess that you are not her anymore. In my impression, she is still a little girl, but you already look like a mature woman, but I just can't control it, I can't give you talk about that feeling." Quote. Cat Niang shook her head, and a smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. "I understand, you don't need to talk about it. Keep walking along this cave, and you will come to a larger space, which is full of dazzling sights and splendid, like the bedroom of a palace." Catgirl motioned to Zhang Yang to sit on the chair, and she went to boil water to make tea. Zhang Yang suddenly felt a hint of coolness behind his back. This is a monster's cave. How could he come here in a daze? It's really sloppy. Cat Niang brought a bowl of tea and handed it to Zhang Yang, then lay on her side on the bed, looked at Zhang Yang with a smile, and asked, "Now tell me who you are and why you came to me. It's fun to say, otherwise I'll eat you." Zhang Yang, who was just about to drink tea, stopped what he was doing, put the tea on the table beside him, looked at Cat Niang and asked, "Have you ever heard of a legend that as long as you eat a piece of Tang Seng's meat, you can live forever?" "Not old." Catgirl shook her head and replied, "I haven't heard of it." This time Zhang Yang was relieved, coughed twice, cleared his throat, and said in a very tone, "I am Zhang Yang who came from the great Tang dynasty in the east and went to the west to worship Buddha and ask for scriptures." Catgirl nodded and said with a smile, "Although I have never heard that eating Tang monk's meat will lead to immortality, but I have heard that as long as you eat the meat of a Buddhist monk, you will be immortal." Zhang Yang almost sat down on the ground, and he quickly explained, "I haven't finished yet. I am Zhang Yang's apprentice who came from the great Tang dynasty in the east and went to the west to worship Buddha and ask for scriptures. My master is going to Wuzhuangguan now. I came to this village because I came for alms for him. If you don't believe me, I can take you to my master. How about you eat his meat?" Cat Niang laughed out loud, covered her mouth and said, "I didn't say I would eat you. Why are you nervous?" Zhang Yang wiped the sweat from his forehead and breathed a sigh of relief. "Don't scare me, I'm a coward." Seeing Catwoman smiling happily, Zhang Yang took the opportunity to ask, "Then can I go to my master?" Catgirl shook her head and said, "You were the one who hugged me just now. How could I let you leave so easily? You've stayed by my side all my life, and it's quite lonely for me to live alone." Zhang Yang said, "It's serious, just give it a hug." Catgirl said, "You are the first person to hug me, so you are my person, I have the final say here." Zhang Yang wanted to justify a few more words, but heard a knock at the entrance of the cave. The catgirl put her ears on the wall and listened for a while, then stuck out her tongue and licked her hand. 3 whiskers suddenly grew on her face. She said with a smile, "Someone is looking for you outside. It's your little lover. I'll go meet her." After the catgirl left, Zhang Yang thought about it for a long time before trying to understand, could it be the monster in green clothes in the woods just now? It's good now, he wants to go and can't go out for the time being, he simply stays here first, wait for them to lose both sides, and he will gain a profit. Wouldn't it be much easier? Zhang Yang twisted his butt. This chair made him really uncomfortable. Just as Catgirl wasn't there, she ran to her bed for a while. Not to mention it was really comfortable, it was the westward journey version of Simmons. But when Zhang Yang carefully saw a corpse above his head, he rolled off the bed in fright. It's fucking scary. In the village, a group of monsters surrounded Yer, and they talked about it. A human being just came, and now another guy who can't see his real body. What day is today? Cat Niang came over, looked at Yer, and said with a smile, the auspicious light shrouded her body, it must have come from the sky. Yer said with a blank expression, if you know the person, then hand him over as soon as possible, and I will spare you not to die. The cat girl smiled and said, then come, let me see what you are capable of. Yer frowned, then stretched out her hand, a cane extending from her cuff. She waved the cane, making a very loud, pop, sound in the air, very powerful. The catgirl's appearance gradually changed, the whiskers on her face became more obvious, the arms grew out of cats, the palms became cat claws that were twice as large, with sharp nails on them, and a tail, which slowly started from behind her buttocks. When it grows out, the image of the cat demon is unobstructed. Yer raised her hand and waved the rattan forcefully, hitting the rattan on Cat Niang's head. As long as she hit it, her head would definitely be blown off. However, the catgirl was not in a hurry, she just turned around gently and avoided the heavy blow of the rattan. Chapter 471, Deception. The rattan hit Cat Niang's head next to her head, only an inch away from her face, causing a strong vibration in the air. Cat Niang didn't blink, staring at Yer. Just when Yer was about to take back the cane, Cat Niang reached out and grabbed her cane, and with a light scratch with the fingernail on her other hand, a large section of the cane was cut off. However, the rattan can be regenerated, and it will soon grow again, and Yeer continued to wave it to attack the catgirl. At this time, Zhang Yang in the cave was still observing the corpse embedded above the bed. The corpse was not rotting, and the whole body was shriveled, without any moisture. After being exposed to the air in this way, it has not been infected by bacteria and rotted. It seems that the catgirl uses mana to maintain the body of the corpse every day. I didn't expect that catgirl is still a serious taste, playing corpse love. Zhang Yang said to himself, because there was no candle on the bed, he couldn't see the specific appearance of the corpse, so he ran to the side of the cave and took it out. A candle was brought over and illuminated the corpse above the bed, but when Zhang Yang saw the person's appearance clearly, it was as if someone had thrown more than a dozen thunderbolts in his mind, and it kept blowing up. The face of this corpse is exactly the same as Zhang Yang. At first, Zhang Yang thought it was because of the relationship between the firelight and the shadow that made him misread, but after he observed it carefully for a while, he did find that the face of the corpse was exactly the same as his. What was going on? Could it be that he just happened to look like him? Dude, it's fate that we look exactly the same, so don't take it to heart. I didn't mean to disturb you. I'll go to you right now. You have a good rest, and you'd better be woken up forever. Zhang Yang as he spoke, he put the candle back to its original position, and just as he was about to walk towards the entrance of the cave, a creepy voice came from behind him. Where are you going? Zhang Yang turned his head tremblingly and saw nothing. He thought he was too afraid to have auditory hallucinations, but just as he was about to leave, the voice came to his mind again. Dude, can you do me a favor? Zhang Yang finally found out, that corpse is a fucking corpse. Help me, he raised his leg and called to run. He saw the location of the hole, but he couldn't find the exit, as if it was blocked by someone. Zhang Yang was so anxious that he yelled, punched and kicked again, took out the flowing blade and slashed wildly, but nothing happened. The hole was still sealed, and there was no sign of damage. Dude, you can't get out. I've been locked here for so many years, and I'd go out long ago if I wanted to go out. Zhang Yang looked back and saw that the corpse had sat on the bed at some point, looking at him with a smile. Zhang Yang was so frightened that he shouted, don't come here. Come here again and I will use the great Sun Tathagata Sutra to knock you into a doom, so that you will never be born again. The corpse smiled bitterly, then I really can't ask for it. Instead of going to hell to experience the pain and torture of the 18th hell, I don't want to suffer from mental pain here. Zhang Yang didn't quite understand what he meant, and asked, aren't you all dead? What pain are you suffering here? Or is it that you look at this beautiful cat lady every day? You can only hope for May to quench your thirst, so it's uncomfortable. The corpse shook his head and said, you may have noticed that when you came to this village, there are some monsters living here, but it was not like this a long time ago. Next, the corpse told Zhang Yang the story of the village. Back then, when the corpse was still alive, his name was Wang Mazi, because he had a lot of pockmarks on his face, so many people in the village were reluctant to associate with him, and even laughed at him for being ugly. Seeing that he was getting married, many girls in the village were unwilling to look at him, and he also suffered from indifference and criticism, so he was cruel and moved. In fact, he didn't move too far, just halfway up the mountain. As long as he didn't hear the cold words of the villagers, he would be satisfied. I don't know if the feng shui changed after the move, but Wang Mazi actually met someone who was willing to marry him, Cat Niang. He didn't know where Catgirl came from, or how old she was, but one day when he was chopping wood in the woods, she came to him, dressed in red, with blank eyes. Wang Mazi thought that she came from somewhere else, and she didn't dress like a villager, so she didn't dare to neglect her, and gave her all the delicious food and drink at home. In this way, Cat Niang and Wang Mazi lived together. Whether it was going up the mountain to fetch water or chopping wood, Cat Niang followed him, never leaving. This made Wang Mazi very proud. He decided to go down the mountain and go back to the village to let those people in the village take a good look. Wang Mazi also had beautiful women by his side. But it was this that led to misfortune. Who would believe that someone could take a fancy to Wang Mazi? So rumors began to spread. Some people said that the cat girl was transformed from a goblin, and she specially came to seduce people's souls. Some people said that the cat girl was mentally retarded. Otherwise, why would she like Wang Mazi? People chatting after dinner. Finally, someone couldn't bear the curiosity, and gathered his companions to go to the mountain to find out, and wanted to see who Cat Lady was. That night, after the men secretly went up the mountain, they leaned in front of the window and peeked in, and found that Wang Mazi was already sleeping on the bed, and the one in his arms was not a cat girl, just a big white cat. Several people were so frightened that they ran down the mountain and told the village that Catgirl was a cat demon with terrifying fangs that had drained Wang Mazi's blood. The villagers carried hoes all night. Scythes, rakes, machetes and other lethal weapons went up the mountain. They pulled out the shriveled Wang Mazi and Cat Niang, beat them, then lit a fire, burned Wang Mazi's house, and then threw Cat Niang into the fire. Inside, they burned for a whole night until the fire was completely extinguished. They dropped Wang Mazi's body and left with confidence. After they left, they stretched out a hand from the ruins, and a slender figure crawled out of it. She couldn't see her appearance in the dark, but she could clearly see those eyes full of resentment and emitting blood-red light. When the first rooster crowing woke the sun that had been sleeping all night, the light enveloped the village, shining on the bloody scabs on the ground and the corpses covered in scars. Appalling. Cat Niang returned to the mountainside, removed Wang Mazi's body, then carried him down the mountain and put it in the village. Wang Mazi smiled bitterly. If I hadn't brought her down the mountain to show off, to satisfy my poor vanity, maybe I wouldn't have killed them. Chapter 472, Accident. After listening to Wang Mazi, Zhang Yang was also panicked. He didn't know how to deal with this matter. Catgirl was a demon but did not take the initiative to harm the villagers. In order to prevent Catgirl from harming them, the villagers took the initiative to set the cat on fire, causing resentment. He thought about it and found two doubts about the whole thing, so he asked, I still have two questions that I don't understand. First, where did this Catgirl come from? Second, she sucks your blood. Do you know? Wang Mazi said, I still don't know where she came from, but I do know that she sucked my blood, and I did it of my own free will. It turned out that when Cat Niang met Wang Mazi for the first time, she took the initiative to reveal her identity and asked him if he could feed her some blood. She hadn't eaten for a long time. It would be a lie to say that he is not afraid, but Wang Mazi was really moved when he saw such a beautiful woman. He nodded, stretched out his arm, and Catwoman opened her mouth and bit down. Think about it, if a monster wants to eat me, why would he give me nonsense and ask me if I can give her some blood to drink? I thought she was actually kind, so I fed her. Wang Mazi recalled. Later, she also confessed to me that this bit of blood could not feed her at all. I was very cruel and let her drain all my blood. Hearing this, Zhang Yang interrupted him and asked, do you have a problem with your brain? Isn't this courting death? Wang Mazi smiled bitterly and said helplessly, it's courting death. I was living in real pain at the time. If it wasn't for her appearance, I really don't know what role I could have. If I live in this world, it's useless at all. Then I'm not even as good as a waste. So, I want to live a more valuable life, and feeding a monster can be considered a good thing. Zhang Yang still didn't understand and asked, you can do good deeds for the people in the village. In this way, not only will your life be worth living, but you will also be able to live, and they will gradually wake up and stop judging people by their appearance. You are very handsome, and I feel in my heart. In other words, Wu Yanzu is far worse than you, because you are too scary. Quote. Wang Mazi shook his head, do you think I haven't won their favor? When I was fetching water and chopping firewood for them, I avoided each and every one of them. It was like looking at a piece of shit. I couldn't stand it. Zhang Yang scolded, such a handsome face is a piece of shit. Damn these scumbags. But when he came back to his senses, he asked again, how did those monsters in the village come from? Catgirl brought them here, is it? Wang Mazi explained, no, they are the villagers who were beaten to death by Catgirl. She turned them into monsters and changed their minds, making them think they were really monsters. Zhang Yang thought for a while and then asked, you said that Cat Niang lived by drinking human blood, but all the villagers died. What did she eat? I heard the meaning of the monster villagers. It seems that Cat Neong won't let them eat people. What the hell is going on here? Wang Mazi shook his head and said, I don't know either, but Cat Neong will go out regularly, so I don't know what to do. Zhang Yang can figure out those who can maintain immortality with his fingers. The first is the reincarnated body of Jin Chanzi, the second is the peach of heaven, the third is the ginseng fruit of Junyuan Daxian, and the other is Taisheng Laojuns. Whether the elixir has the ability to live forever, he doesn't know. It seems that this catgirl's background is a bit big. The first few can live for a long time after a bite. She has to go out regularly. Is it possible that she has some connection with Taisheng Laojun? Zhang Yang didn't plan to think about this. He knew very well that the so-called gods must have had contact with the monsters in the underground. The water was deep here, so he didn't plan to find out. As the saying goes, the more you know, the faster you die. At this time, Wang Mazi said again, you know what? I can see Catgirl every day. I have fallen in love with her, but I'm just a corpse, and I don't even have the courage to touch her. This kind of torment is better than being in hell. It's still painful to endure torture. I heard you claim that your family is a monk from the Eastern Land Tang dynasty. You might as well spare me and let me go to hell. Now Zhang Yang is embarrassed. If he is a real monk, he might help him, but how can a fake monk who has never even seen the scriptures understand such a thing? He couldn't tell the truth either, so he could only say with careless eyes, look at the cat girl who put you on the top of the bed. The first person she wakes up to look at every day is you. She loves you. Wang Mazi didn't speak. He looked at the wall inside the bed and waved at Zhang Yang, motioning him to come over. Zhang Yang put away Lu Ren Ruahuo and walked over. Wang Mazi touched his hand lightly on the wall, and saw a light circle spread out from the position where he pointed, and the light circle gradually expanded, forming a transparent wall, and inside the wall, then there are the ghosts of the villagers in the whole village. Wang Mazi said, I'm just a gatekeeper for her. She locks up these grievances. Every day, she sees them in pain, and then smirks for a while. Although I love her, I'm more afraid of her. This woman is very scary and very scary. For a long time, I don't understand what she is doing here. She built a village full of monsters, and she doesn't do anything wrong. These monsters are not real. Sigh, the more I think about it, the more I feel cold all over. Zhang Yang said, brother, you were already cold. I feel cold now, and I remember that she told me that I was the first person to hug her. Bah, women are all liars, obviously you are the first. Quote. Wang Mazi also said, bah, who knows if I'm the first, alas. Just when Zhang Yang was talking to Wang Mazi in the cave, the battle between Catwoman and Yer was still going on in the village. Yer's cane could extend infinitely, and Catwoman's sharp claws could break anything. It was about the same. Finally Cat Neong's patience was worn out. She waved all the little demons on. Yer saw a group of monsters rushing towards her. She put away the rattan, raised her hands, and transformed a lot of willow leaves around her. These willow leaves were as thin as cicada wings and sharp as blades. It rained down on them. The monsters were beaten to pieces by countless willow leaves, and their bodies were cut several times. It didn't take long for these monsters to be cut into pieces, and when the wind blew, they all floated away. Cat Neong saw that Yer was not an ordinary earth immortal, and did not intend to entangle with her. She was about to evacuate. At this moment, countless roaring sounds came from the direction of her cave. When she looked back, she saw Zhang Yang running from the other side of the street with his legs spread out. And behind him, hundreds of black undead souls followed, and they were grabbing at Zhang Yang with their claws and claws. Walking dead. Zhang Yang cried and ran towards Cat Neong and Yer. The two strong women stopped their work first. Save me. Chapter 473. The Stingy Guanyin. In the cave, Zhang Yang looked at the blocked ghost in the wall and asked, Brother Mazi, is your ghost also inside? Why didn't you see it? Wang Mazi explained, of course mine is in the body, otherwise how can I talk to you? Catwoman may be nostalgic, so she didn't lock my soul in. The souls of these people have been holding grudges against Catwoman for a long time, and she told me to be sure look after them so they never have a chance to be reborn. Quote. Zhang Yang shook his head, thinking about women, what a terrible species. Seeing that Wang Mazi was still poking his finger on the wall, he asked, is your finger the switch of this wall? Is this wall reliable? Yes, my fingers are equivalent to keys. As long as nothing touches the wall when I insert it, nothing will happen. After Wang Mazi finished speaking, he saw Zhang Yang touching the wall with his hands, and he was shocked. Eyeballs fell out, shouting, what are you doing? Zhang Yang looked at Wang Mazi with a veiled face, and said, you fucking didn't say it sooner. What should I do now? Wang Mazi shouted, run. I'll help you open the cave door. Zhang Yang pulled his legs and ran away, and Wang Mazi wanted to forcibly close the wall at this time, but there were too many wrong souls inside. The souls of the whole village were inside, and the strength can be imagined. He couldn't resist, and the wall was hit. When it broke open, the unjust souls inside poured out, swallowing Wang Mazi in the soul group. Fortunately, he opened the cave door at the last moment, and Zhang Yang ran out of the cave and came to the outside of the village. When he turned a corner, he saw Cat Niang and Yi were dueling. He thought that he would die both horizontally and vertically, and it would be better to die at the hands of the two beauties, so he went to their side. Cat Niang frowned when she saw the grievances of the villagers. When she imprisoned these spirits, they were just ghosts with no resentment, but now they are grievances, and their abilities have improved a lot, so Cat Niang may not be able to subdue them. At this time, Zhang Yang had already run behind Cat Niang, panting and said, what should I do? Yi also said at this time, let's retreat first. The resentment of a village's grievances is extremely powerful, and the power of the three of us cannot restrain them. Cat Niang didn't want to join forces with Yi, but now she can't be brave and can only retreat with them. Zhang Yang looked back as he ran. These grievances stood at the entrance of the village and shy away. They stretched out their hands in pain and grabbed randomly in the air. Their eyes were painful and helpless. It was a kind of deep despair, like falling into extreme abyss of despair. After the three came to a forest on the mountain, before they could stand firm, Cat Niang and Yi fought again. Zhang Yang was sitting on the ground, fanning the wind while opening his cassock. He panted and said, I said two beauties, can I ask why you two are fighting? It's very inexplicable. Unexpectedly, Cat Niang and Yi turned around at the same time. One rapped Zhang Yang with a cane, the other grabbed his neck with his hands, and the two shot at the same time to subdue Zhang Yang. Cat Niang approached Zhang Yang's left head and said, well, you stinky monk, I kindly invite you to a cup of tea, but you make trouble and let out those bad souls, I can't spare you. Yi also came to Zhang Yang's right head and said, why don't you go to Wuzhuang Temple with me, stay with this goblin privately, and say, what are you conspiracy? Catgirl raised her head and stared at Yi fiercely, and sneered, hee hee, goblin. Aren't you? Yi also looked directly at Cat Niang and said, I am the willow leaf in the jade bottle of Guanyin Bodhisattva, how can I be the same as you? The two of you kept arguing with each other. Zhang Yang's body was strangled by Rattan, his neck was pinched by Catgirl, his entire face turned purple, and he struggled to say a few words from his throat. But, the person appointed by Guanyin. The learner. Cat Niang let go of her hand with a Yi also withdrew the cane, and the two turned around in unison, facing away from each other. Zhang Yang took a few deep breaths, his brain was exploding, and when he recovered, he asked with a sad face, you are sent by Guanyin Bodhisattva, why didn't you tell me earlier, take me to Wukong. Before Yi could speak, Cat Niang was unhappy at first. She grabbed Zhang Yang and said, monk, you let go of the unjust soul I'm imprisoning, so you just want to leave. Zhang Yang patted his head and almost forgot about it. He smiled apologetically and said, Catgirl, what do you think I should do? I don't have the mana to help you catch them again. I'm just an ordinary person. At this time, Yi asked, you killed a villager, and you deserve to die. Sooner or later, you will be punished. The catgirl said coldly, they should be damned. Yi just wanted to drag Zhongyang to Wuzhuangguan, when suddenly, the voice of Guanyin Bodhisattva came from the sky. Bastards, killing people and saying they deserve to die is simply more sins. Yi knelt down on the ground and said, Bodhisattva, the disciple is incompetent, and he hasn't brought the sutra collector to Wuzhuang temple. When Zhongyang saw the Avalokitesvara Bodhisattva coming, he immediately complained like a bodhisattva, saying that he was tricked, and the disciples also left him and ran away. As a master, he blamed himself very much, and wanted to ask the bodhisattva to bestow the Dharma treasure. Can control those naughty apprentices. Guanyin got angry when he saw Zhongyang and said, What magic weapon do you want? Zhongyang said, Golden hoops. How many do you want? Wukong has to wear 100 or so, Baji has a fat head and big ears, it has to be 300, and Sha Seng has more. You know that he wants to wear it every day. Kill me, how about a gold hoop? Guanyin sighed and said, That's right, it's impossible for someone like you who has no ability to discipline that monkey, but the golden hoop is a limited edition. Wukong is one, and Luojia is mine. There is still one black bear in the mountain, and there will be no more. Quote. Zhongyang said with disbelief, Is there really no more? Guanyin's face was sincere, Of course not anymore. It seems that this Guanyin is really stingy, she obviously has a lot more, and she will need to conquer the red boy in the future, but now she says she doesn't have it anymore. Zhongyang is also not easy to dismantle, so he can only swallow his anger and no longer ask for any magic weapon. At this time, Guanyin looked at the cat girl, waved her fingers, and put a shiny golden thing on her head, and then thought something in her mouth. The cat girl fell to the ground with a splitting headache and rolled over. Zhongyang was dumbfounded. Didn't he just say that there is no golden hoop? Why are you taking out another one now? He asked. Guanyin Bodhisattva, are you a little too embarrassing for me? Guanyin coughed twice and said, I just remembered it wrong. This time is really the last one. Besides, if the monkey wanted to kill you, would you be able to live to this day? Now this evil beast has killed a lot of people. Then the sin deserves 10,000 death, but my Buddha is merciful and intends to make her take refuge. Quote. Chapter 474, Beauties follow. Zhongyang saw the cat girl on the ground rolling around because of a headache. He knew the power of the golden hoop, so he hurried over to help the cat girl up and wanted Guanyin to intercede. But he never imagined that when he ran over to help Cat Niang suddenly raised her head and showed a completely different look from before. She bit Zhongyang's neck at the same time. Guanyin recited the confinement mantra again. The longer the Guanyin Bodhisattva recites, the more Cat Niang's head hurts, and the harder she bites on Zhongyang's neck. Zhongyang felt cramps all over his body, but he saw the tears on Cat Niang's face, but he didn't make a sound and let her bite. Finally, Cat Niang released her mouth and pulled out the fangs stuck in Zhongyang's neck. She also fainted on the ground because of the severe pain. There were 2 rows of deep impressions on Zhongyang's neck, and blood gushed out from the wound where the 2 deepest fangs pierced, making the original red cassock more vivid. He forgot the pain from his wound, reached out and wiped the blood that oozes out of Catgirl's head because the gold hoop got into her scalp. Guanyin Bodhisattva said, Okay, now Yer will take you to meet Wukong and the others. I will bring this cat demon back to South Blue and teach her to practice well. Zhongyang didn't relax while holding the unconscious catgirl. He didn't even raise his head, and said to Guanyin, No, I'll take her away. Guanyin asked, Why? Zhongyang said, She looks like an old friend of mine. Guanyin obviously wouldn't let him mess around like this, and said, The team for the collection of scriptures has already been decided. You are a monk, and it is inconvenient to bring a female fairy on the road, and this is the will of the Buddha, you are not qualified to fool around. Yer, take him away. Quote. Yer nodded and walked to Zhongyang. She was about to stretch out her hand to pull him away, but suddenly a golden light flashed in front of her eyes. Around Zhongyang's body, she didn't know when there was an extra golden bell, and she couldn't get close at all. His body, just when Yer was about to take out the rattan and attempt to smash the golden bell hood, Guanyin spoke. Forget it, You monk is as stubborn as that monkey. Since you want to take her with you, you can do what you want, but I'll take off the gold hoop on her head." After saying that, Guanyin flew out of the lotus platform, walked to Cat Neong, took off the golden hoop on her head, then reached out and touched her head, then returned to the lotus platform, and said, "The villager I will save the wronged souls, and you should move forward quickly." Quote. In the woods, Zhang Yang was carrying the cat girl on his back, with a cloth bag wrapped around his neck. The wound had been treated by Yi and there was no more bleeding, but the cat girl on his back had not woken up. Zhang Yang couldn't figure out why Guanyin Bodhisattva would give such a vicious hand to a cat demon. Even though it was my Buddha's compassion, she didn't think about the cause and effect at all, so she hurt the cat girl like this, which was simply too far from the Bodhisattva in his heart. Is this the Buddha? Yi stayed silent for a long time. She bit her lip lightly and endured it for a long time before she finally asked, "Aren't you really Jin Chanzi?" Zhang Yang turned his head to look at her, but the wound on his neck was affected, and the pain caused him to breathe cold air. After he had calmed down a little, he replied, "I really am not. Jin Chanzi is no longer in the three realms." Yi pouted, with a lonely look on her face. She said slowly, "When you were protecting that goblin just now, I almost thought you were him." Zhang Yang asked, "Have you ever had a relationship with Jin Chanzi?" "I have only met him once, but I admire him very much, beyond the wisdom of the three realms." Yi shook her head and said, "I won't mention the past, just treat it as a dream." I don't know how long after walking, Cat Neong woke up from Zhang Yang's back. She struggled to jump down, then stared blankly at Zhang Yang and Yi, and asked, "Who are you?" Zhang Yang stepped forward and asked, "No, we just met. You bit me like this, you can't turn your face and don't recognize me." He pointed to the wound on his neck. Catgirl covered her mouth and asked in disbelief, "How could I bite you?" Who am I?" Zhang Yang looked at Yi at a loss and asked, "What should I do now?" She seems to have lost her memory. Yi shook her head and said, "Are you sure you want to take her with you? She's just a trouble." Zhang Yang nodded firmly. "She is really similar to an old friend of mine. Although I can't remember her at all, I don't think she will lie." Yi said, "Then you lie to her and say you are her brother." "It can only be like this." Cat Neong is still looking at them with a look of fear. Zhang Yang stepped forward, took her hand, and said softly, "Don't be afraid, I'm your little brother." How does it feel weird?" He shook his head and said again, "I'm your brother." Cat Neong reached out and touched Zhang Yang's face, and asked, "Really? But I can't remember anything. By the way, who is she?" Cat Neong pointed at Yi and asked again. Zhang Yang wanted to make up the whole set, so he said to her, "She is Yi, your sister." Catgirl nodded thoughtfully, and then asked, "Didn't you say that you just met me? Why is it my brother again, you liar?" Zhang Yang wanted to cry, but Yi didn't say a word. Cat Neong looked at the two of them for a long time before saying, "Actually, although I don't remember it, you really didn't hurt me, so I don't care." Yi walked up to Cat Neong at this time and said, "I don't know if you're pretending or you really have lost your memory. Anyway, be good to me, now our time is tight, don't make trouble, I'm not as easy to talk as he is." Catwoman blinked her eyes and nodded, then walked beside Zhang Yang, distanced herself from Yi and Zhang Yang quietly gave Yi a thumbs up. Under the leadership of Yi the group embarked on the correct path of learning the scriptures. They walked for many days in a row, sleeping in the forest at night, eating wild fruits when they were hungry, and drinking stream water when they were thirsty. It was really hard for Zhang Yang and Cat Neong. Individual. Yi is a practitioner and doesn't eat meat, but Catwoman is a goblin and Zhang Yang is a human being. The two of them have been thinking about how to go to the woods and try some game, but Yi is too careful, and they still haven't been able to taste the meat. After a long time, with two beauties to accompany, Zhang Yang felt much more comfortable than staying with a team like monkeys, pigs, and savages. Every day can be pleasing to the eyes and go to the west sky with a happy mood, Hila. Rather than. However, Zhang Yang found more and more that Yi was a little strange. It stands to reason that she was going to take Zhang Yang to chase Wukong, but why is the walking speed getting slower and slower? Chapter 475, Master and Disciple Meeting. Perhaps because of Zhang Yang's suspicion, they walked for a few more days before arriving at Wuzhuangguan. They saw a stone tablet outside the gate of Wuzhuangguan with 10 words engraved on it. Longevity Mountain Blessed Land, Wuzhuangguan Cave Heaven. Going inside, I came to the gate, and there was another couplet on the gate, which read, the immortal mansion of immortality, and the family of people who have the same longevity as the sky. Hockey is leaking, Zhang Yang said. I heard about this Zhenyuan Daxian before, but today I found out that he is not a young man. He is as old as the sky. Yi walked up the stone steps first and said, when I was in Luojia Mountain, I once heard Guanyin Bodhisattva talk about Zhenyuan Daxian, and I heard that Sanqing was his friend, the 4 emperors were his old friends, and Zhuyao was his junior. Yuan Chen is his guest. And he knows how to grow ginseng fruit that can live forever, so his status is much more prominent. Cat Niang followed Zhang Yang and asked, what is ginseng fruit? Zhang Yang didn't know what to say, so he explained it to her like this. A doll born on a tree can live if you eat one. How many years have you lived? I also forgot. Don't worry, Zhen Yuanzi will invite me to eat after I go in. I'll give you a taste when the time comes. Yi suddenly stopped, turned around, looked at Zhang Yang suspiciously, and asked, how did you know about ginseng fruit? Have you been here before? Zhang Yang didn't want to explain too much, so he made up a lie, I just heard about it. Yi didn't speak anymore, and took them to the gate of Wuzhuang Temple. Before he knocked on the door, he saw 2 Taoist boys walking out of the door, bowing their hands, who's here? Just as Yi was about to speak, Zhang Yang rushed in front of her and said, hey, it's finally time for me to appear. The 2 of you must be Qingfeng and Mingyu. I came from the great Tang dynasty in the east and went to the west to pray to Buddha. The Tang monk of the scriptures, the 10th reincarnation of Jin Chanzi, please tell your patriarch, I had friendship with your patriarch before the 10th generation, and I count him as an old friend. Quote. Yi heard Zhang Yang say that he is a Tang monk, the reincarnation of Jin Chanzi, but why didn't he say that before? She was about to ask him to ask questions, but saw Zhang Yang turn around and wink at her, signaling her not to speak. Qingfeng and Mingyu looked at each other and whispered, why is there another Tang monk? After listening to them, Zhang Yang knew that it was Wukong and the others who had come, so he hurriedly said, this girl is the number 1 disciple of Guanyin Bodhisattva, and she can testify that I am a Tang monk. The one who came before may be my inferior disciple. I wonder if they are in there. After Qingfeng heard the words Wukong, his eyes rolled around for a while, and then he suddenly greeted him with a smile. I am sorry, it's Elder Tang, please come in. Zhang Yang was a little confused, but he had to go ahead and talk about it. According to the development of the original work, he would be able to eat the legendary ginseng fruit immediately. Coming to the room, the 2 Taoist boys offered tea to the 3 of them, and then left first. After seeing them leave, Yi finally couldn't help but ask, why do you say that you are Jin Chanzi? You also say that I am the first disciple of Guanyin Bodhisattva, isn't that a lie? Zhang Yang explained, what do you know, not to mention the reincarnation of Jin Chanzi, can you give us ginseng fruit? If you say your background is higher, won't you also give you a fruit to eat? I do this entirely for the sake of you. Cat Niang didn't speak, she turned her head away and watched the furnishings in the room. Seeing that he ignored her, Zhang Yang hurriedly coaxed, kitten cat. Angry, that Daodong will give me 2 fruits, of course I will give you 1, don't worry, how could I forget you? The cat girl stared at him indifferently and said with a smile, thank you very much. This look was completely different from the previous cat girl. Zhang Yang was so frightened that he was sweating coldly. Could it be that the memory loss was something she couldn't pretend? He was about to ask, but Qingfeng and Mingyu came in at this time. The 2 of them had a plate in their hands. On the plate were some steamed buns and house dishes. Zhang Yang looked embarrassed. Looking at the table full of vegetarian dishes, he muttered, isn't it like this in TV dramas? Where's my ginseng fruit? Yi was in no mood to eat. Her task was to find Zhang Yang's 3 apprentices, so she planned to go to Qingfeng Mingyu to ask, but at this moment, there was a loud noise outside the door, and a few strange-looking people pushed enter the door. When Zhang Yang saw a few of them, he stood up with a bass, pointed at a man with a fur-faced Lei Gong's mouth and scolded. Okay, you son of a bitch, you fucking dare to leave me and return the golden hoop to me. See if I don't miss you. Yes, it was Wukong, Baji and Sha Sang who came. They were also shocked to see Zhang Yang and the 2 girls together. Wukong smiled and said, Donkey, didn't you stay and get married? What, these 2 girls don't look like that family. Zhang Yang didn't intend to argue with him, then pointed at Baji and asked, even your big-eyed Marshal Tianpeng betrayed the revolution. Baji scratched his head embarrassedly and said, Master, look at what you said, don't you all want to get married, and we also discussed that night, it was you who asked us to go first, why do you blame it instead? Where's the old pig? Zhang Yang was not good at quibbling when he heard it, and then pointed at Seng Sha, looked at him for a long time, then gritted his teeth and said, forget it, what the fuck do you have to say? At this time, Yi saw that their master and apprentice had been reunited, and the mission was completed. She also wanted to go back to South Blue. She looked back at the cat girl who was sitting at the table eating by herself, and asked, you really don't want to go back to South Blue with me? Cat Niang smiled and shook her head. Your Guanyin can't wait to kill me, what good fruit can I eat when I go back? Yi said, it really is pretending to have amnesia, what conspiracy do you have? The cat girl still smiled and said, if you don't pretend to have amnesia, you will probably kill me in the middle of it, but now that you are here, with a few of them here, I see what you can do to me. If you force me in a hurry, I will publish the things in the South Blue Luogia mangosteen forest. Quote. Of course Yi couldn't understand what she was talking about, but now she could only go back to ask Guanyin Bodhisattva for his life, and then said goodbye without looking back. Zhang Yang was about to reach out to stop her, but Wukong pulled her back. Bald donkey, who is this? Wukong asked, pointing at the cat girl. Leave her alone, let me ask you, when did you arrive at Wuzhuangguan? Zhang Yang asked. You guys are walking much faster than me, so it looks like you just arrived. Baji explained. We came a few days early, but something happened, so it was delayed for a few days. Zhang Yang asked. What happened? At this time, Cat Niang said leisurely. I am afraid there is something wrong with the ginseng fruit. Chapter 476, Fate. Wukong jumped on the chair and said to Cat Niang, oh. Where is this girl from? Cat Niang said. The sky is the quilt, the status is the bed, and the 4 seas are the home. I have heard the name of the great sage equaling heaven for a long time, but when I see it today, it is indeed extraordinary. Listening to the 2 of them chatting over there, Zhang Yang took the opportunity to ask Baji what happened to them in the past 2 days. Baji pulled Zhang Yang aside and said, we didn't plan to stay here any longer, we just stayed overnight and left. As a result, that night, Brother Monkey said that he heard the cry of a baby in the Wuzhuang temple. After that, Baji told Zhang Yang what happened here. When Wukong and the others came to the Wuzhuang temple, Zhenyuan Daxian was still in the Shengqing Tianmiruo palace to listen to Yuanshi Tianzun talking about Hunyuan Daoguo, and the 2 Dao boys Qingfeng and Mingyu greeted them. That night, the moon in the sky was full, so Baji didn't sleep in the room, but went outside the door to look at the moon, thinking of Chang'e. He had a chain on his hand, and the other chain was tied to Sand Monk's 2 wrists, in order to prevent him from sneaking away. So Bajia sat on the steps to watch the moon, while Sha Seng fell asleep beside him snoring. About midnight, Wukong pushed open the door and asked Bajia if he heard anything. Baji shook his head and said no, where did he hear any sound, and Sha Seng was snoring like thunder next to him, and he was almost deaf. After that, Wukong slapped Monk Sha to wake up, and then asked Baji to listen carefully. Baji pricked up his ears. At first, he didn't hear anything, but after a long time, he suddenly heard some movement. Hey! Baji was taken aback. This is the cry of a baby, Could it be that this Wuzhuang temple is a Yuseo temple? Can someone have a baby here? Wukong shook his head. This is a gymnasium. If raising children here would be a joke, there should be some other reason, so the two dragged Sand Monk to check it together. Wuzhuangguan is very big. There are many houses here, and there is a big backyard, but the strange thing is that the backyard is empty and nothing, but if you listen carefully, the cry of the baby is coming from here. Wukong and the others searched for a long time, but they couldn't find anything. For the next 2 days, they stayed here and didn't leave. They planned to clarify this matter. For this reason, Qingfeng and Mingyu didn't like to see them, but they shunned them. It is not easy for people to say it outright. After all, it is a person who is going to the Tathagata Buddha to learn scriptures, and it is inevitable to become a Buddha in the future. Hearing this, Zhang Yang asked, "That's not right, the scripture-taking team is obviously missing me. How can I hear Qingfeng say that another Tang monk has come? What's the matter with you?" Baji explained, "Brother Monkey used monkey hair to change one, and you got out of the way. Anyway, the two Daotong boys are not cultivated enough to see it. But if Junyuanzi comes back, it won't work. You can see it with your toes." Quote. At this time Wukong also said, "At first I thought it was in the underground of the backyard. The old grandson went in and saw it. It was no different from the ordinary underground, but the cries of those babies were really there. It's hell." Zhang Yang remembered Huang Feng Monster's fantasy realm from the Yellow Sand Desert, so he said, "Do you still remember the fantasy realm in Huang Fengling? Could it be the same reason? There is a switch in the backyard. As long as you find the switch, you can find the ginseng fruit tree. I think we'll look for it right away. I really want to taste what that ginseng fruit tastes like." Wukong felt that what he said made sense, and said, "It seems to make sense, but we can only try it until midnight. We have been going to the backyard too often recently, which has caused those two little babies to constantly monitor us, and they are still lying on the ground. The wall is eavesdropping on us." Hearing what he said, Zhang Yang ran over and opened the window on the side, and he really saw Qingfeng and Mingyu smirking at him awkwardly. Zhang Yang turned around and taught Wukong, "You said you knew they were lying on the wall, why couldn't you say it in advance? Where do you let me put the face of a master monk? Instigate my apprentices to steal other people's ginseng fruit, so that people can hear it. What do you think? Are you saying I'm embarrassed?" Qingfeng said, "Please rest well, my master will be back soon. When he comes back, he will naturally invite you to enjoy ginseng fruit." Zhang Yang slammed the window shut, only to see a smear of blood on the window paper, and then there was the groan of the breeze and the sound of the two running away. Zhang Yang scolded and sat down on the chair. "Eavesdropping on other people's speech will cost you a nosebleed, little brat." Cat Niang almost finished all the dishes on the table, and then she said to Zhang Yang, "They both look small, but they are almost 100 or 200 years old. No matter how you look at you look like a child. Don't discuss this. By the way, didn't you just say that South Blue has a secret?" Zhang Yang asked. "What secret? Can you tell me secretly?" Wukong said from the side, "Bald donkey, the more you know, the faster you die." Zhang Yang said dissatisfiedly, "Then what's the matter with you? Why do you have to know the secret of this ginseng fruit? Don't you die faster too?" Wukong smiled and said, "This is my destiny. I have already died. It doesn't matter if I know more before I die." A dead end. Zhang Yang felt that Wukong's smile suddenly became heavy, and he asked, "How could you die?" "As long as you don't cause trouble and go all the way to the west with me, you will be able to defeat the Buddha in the future." Okay. Wukong obviously didn't want to say anything more to him, so he sat and drank with the teapot. What the great sage said is not unreasonable. Human death is fate, so it depends on the method of death. Catwoman said, "As far as I know, this ginseng fruit tree is implicated in the things in the South Blue Luogia mangosteen forest. I don't dare to talk nonsense, unless I see the real face of the ginseng fruit tree to find out." Zhang Yang looked at Cat Niang and asked curiously, "What's your background? You know so much." Catgirl smiled and looked at Zhang Yang, reached out and touched his face, and said in a lazy voice, Don't worry about it so much, since you said you want to take me to the west, I take it seriously. Zhang Yang nodded, showing a helpless expression. Of course, but why do I feel that you are treating me like an outsider, and that you are hiding something from me? Baji said at this time, Master, you just need to complete your path of learning the scriptures, and then find the gate of time and space to go home. Our destiny is not your destiny. For a time, Zhang Yang looked at the smiling cat girl, the monkey with a leisurely face, the old pig with kind eyes, and the sand monk who was still staring at the two big eyes. He suddenly felt a sadness in his heart, and his brain some bad thoughts flashed through him, and he had a premonition that the fate of these people would not be very good. Chapter 477, The Primordial Spirit. It was already evening after the vegetarian meal was not eaten much. Zhang Yang and the others waited in the small house for the night, and then went to the backyard to look for ginseng fruit trees. I don't know why, but in this huge temple of 5 villages, people always feel deserted, as if they haven't seen a few Taoist priests. Zhang Yang thought it was strange, since both Qingfeng and Mingyu overheard their plans, why not send more people to guard them? Are you so confident that ginseng fruit trees will not be found? Zhang Yang thought about it and felt that there must be some problem that they didn't notice, so he asked, I thought about a question just now, and now I will make an assumption. If there are many Taoist priests guarding the courtyard, what method would you use? Avoid them and go out without them noticing. Baji replied, how simple it is, to make a way to escape, or turn into flies and mosquitoes or something, under normal circumstances they would not notice it. Zhang Yang shook his head, obviously none of these methods worked. He said, if a fly flew past me, I would definitely kick it into the wall with a 720-degree Thomas spin, and I wouldn't be able to pull it out. I want to ask if there is such a spell as invisibility, can they detect it? Baji shook his head, indicating that he would not be able to stealth. At this time, Seng Sha, who had never expressed his position, actually made a move. He stared wide-eyed, then raised a finger and turned it around his head a few times, and then shaking his head and winking, he stomped back and forth. The 3 master and apprentice looked at each other and didn't quite understand what he meant. Zhang Yang first guessed, do you mean to pretend to be crazy and sell stupid like a fool? Sha Seng was so angry that he rushed up to hit Zhang Yang, but Baji grabbed him and held him back, motioning him not to get angry. However, at this time, Cat Niang realized something and asked, you mean the primordial spirit is out of the body? Unexpectedly, someone could finally understand what he meant. Tears came out of Monk San's eyes, and he nodded suddenly to Catwoman. Wukong clapped his hands and said, there is such a way, our flesh is here, but the primordial spirit can go out and move freely without being noticed. Baji turned and asked Zhang Yang, Master, what do you mean by asking this? And now there's no one guarding us outside, why are you thinking of this way to get out? Zhang Yang tiptoed to the front of the door, squatted down and looked out through the crack of the door. There was no one outside, and he said with confidence, I have a bold idea. How precious is this ginseng fruit tree? Think about it, eat one, how old is it? Baji added, I heard that if you smell it, you can live 360 years, and if you eat one, you can live 47,000 years. Zhang Yang gave Baji a thumbs up and said, good pig. That's right, such a precious ginseng fruit tree, and so confidently not afraid of being found, must be able to see it in a very unusual way. I assume for a moment, if the way to see this ginseng fruit tree is to see it only if the human spirit is out of the body, then they will definitely not send someone to guard it, otherwise it will force us to have the spirit out of the body. Since we don't send people keeping it means that we won't leave our primordial spirit, and we will blatantly look for it with our real body, and we will not be able to find it. They are relieved. Quote. Everyone was confused. Zhang Yang said to Baji, Pig, please give them a few more explanations. Baji shook his head and said, Master, you said a lot, but I didn't quite understand it. Just say it directly, you have some guesses. Zhang Yang had no choice but to say, I was thinking, could this ginseng fruit tree be seen only by the primordial spirit? Although Wukong didn't quite understand how Zhongyang figured it out, he planned to give it a try, so a primordial spirit flew out of his body and flew to the backyard. Seeing that Brother Monkey didn't move, Baji knew that he had left, and then he pushed the monk Sha, indicating that he would also come along, so the two of them also went out of the body together. Cat Niang also did this trick, and before she had time to say hello to Zhongyang, she went out of her body and left the room. Zhongyang was the only one left, still waiting for a response from them. After a long time, no one paid any attention to him, so he had to turn around and said angrily, "Che, I just guessed, and didn't say it must be true." After a while, Zhongyang had been lying in front of the door for a long time. His neck was sore. He stood up and moved his body, and then asked, "Do you think Qingfeng and Mingyu are boys or girls?" Pretty. After asking for a long time, there was no response. Zhongyang turned around and asked, "What's the matter with you? You haven't spoken since just now, what's the matter? Do you have an opinion on me? If you have an opinion, hit me." Ignoring him, Zhongyang noticed that they were all in the same posture as before, motionless, and he suddenly realized that this motherfucker is out of the body. Zhongyang shouted and rushed out the door. While scolding them for being unjust, he ran to the backyard of Wu Zhuangguan. But the primordial spirit after the primordial spirit left the body can only be done by the same primordial spirit. Zhongyang couldn't see any figures at all, and the huge backyard was still deserted and empty. At this time, when the cool wind blew, Zhongyang felt cold. He hugged his body, and found that it was a little inappropriate for him to rush out like this, so he shrank back and walked back. However, as soon as he turned around, the two big faces in front of him almost made him fall to the ground. Zhongyang rubbed his butt balls and asked, "Why are you two here?" Qingfeng smiled and said, "Elder. Don't be afraid, I'm here to call you." Mingyu nodded. "I wanted to go into the room to find you just now, but saw you running out of it, so we followed." Zhongyang stood up and asked incomprehensibly, "What do you two have to do with me? It's getting dark, what's the matter? I'll talk about it when I get back from the scriptures, okay?" After talking about Zhongyang, he planned to drill into the room. He was afraid that Qingfeng and Mingyu would see Wukong and they were already in a state of being out of their bodies. As a result, he didn't take a few steps when Qingfeng and Mingyu followed, and the two of them helped each other. With publicity, he walked straight past their room and went somewhere else. "You two, stay safe, my master and I are old friends, so don't come here," Zhongyang said. "Don't be afraid, elder, my master told us before he left, saying that the passing monk is his old friend. Let us give ginseng fruit to taste, and we can't be neglected," Qingfeng said. "That's right, when the elder first came, we didn't give the fruit to eat, because there were too many outsiders, and it was inconvenient to take it out. We specially found a time for the night to secretly invite the elder to come over and taste it alone," Mingyu said. It turned out that he was invited to eat ginseng fruit, and those guys went out of their bodies to find it, and Zhongyang was secretly having fun. "It's good, after eating it, you will live forever and live forever." Chapter 478, Procrastination. Qingfeng and Mingyu brought Zhongyang to a room, lit a candle, and then went to get the golden hammer and tray. Seeing this, Zhongyang hurriedly asked them what they were going for, and Qingfeng said that he was going to beat the ginseng fruit. "This is bad. Wukong and the others don't know if they will come back now. If they are caught by these two Daotong boys, it will be miserable." Zhongyang hurriedly pulled them to sit on the chair, then closed the door by himself, leaned against the door, and said, "Why are you in such a hurry? The best time to eat fruit should be late at night. It's too early to go now. We have to. Why don't you play a game or something?" Qingfeng and Mingyu looked at each other, although they thought it was strange, but they were monks. Since they said they would eat in the middle of the night, they had to fight in the middle of the night. It was really just nighttime, so they put the golden hammer and the tray back where they were. Qingfeng said, "Then elder, what game are we playing?" Zhongyang asked. "Actually, there is something I don't understand. What is the gender of the two of you?" Qingfeng and Mingyu suddenly washed their heads. blushing, and said in unison, "They are boys." Zhang Yang held a mouthful of old blood in his chest and almost spat it out. He calmed down and said, "Well, since it's a boy, we don't have any fun. I suddenly feel dizzy and want to go to rest. Let's talk about eating ginseng fruit tomorrow, okay?" Qingfeng and Mingyu shook their heads together and said, "No, the master will be back tomorrow. We must give you ginseng fruit tonight. Don't the elders want to eat fruit?" Zhang Yang nodded and said, "I don't like fruit the most in my life. Think about it, I've eaten so many wild fruits along the way that I almost vomited. What apples, bananas, pears, watermelons, cherries, etc., especially if you eat ginseng fruit that can live for 47,000 years, I really don't like it." Zhang Yang said that he was about to cry. Who in the world doesn't want to eat ginseng fruit? Who doesn't want to live forever? But now, for the sake of his apprentices, he is willing to risk it. Qingfeng and Mingyu watched him talk with tears in their eyes, and they really believed that he was tired of eating fruit, so they summed up and ate the fruit themselves. If they don't eat it, they can't throw away such a good fruit, they can only eat it themselves. Since the elders really don't like to eat, then we don't force the elders. Qingfeng said and retrieved the golden hammer and the tray, and went out with Mingyu. Seeing this, Zhang Yang blocked the door and didn't let it go, stopped them and asked, "Since I don't even eat them, why are you still holding them?" Qingfeng said, "Why are the elders so excited? We just went to see the ginseng fruit trees. It is a daily practice to count the number of fruits, so that no one will steal and eat them without knowing." Steal eating, who would steal it? Zhang Yang smiled awkwardly, then said, "The two Taoists sit down and listen to me first. Since I am a guest from afar, of course you should stay with me and talk more. Talking, just leave like this, isn't it very unhospitable?" Qingfeng asked inexplicably, "Isn't the elder accompanied by a few of your apprentices? Don't they talk with you? Also, you've been out for so long, so it's time to go back and say hello to them." Zhang Yang pressed them onto the chairs, then took their arms, and said with a bitter look on his face, "You two don't know something, I really don't want to stay with those scoundrels, they want to eat me in a different way." This time it attracted the interest of Qingfeng and Mingyu, and hurriedly asked why. Zhang Yang breathed a sigh of relief for a while, and then added fuel to them and made up some things about Wukong and the others. "My eldest apprentice, Sun Wukong, was the great sage equaling heaven, who was famous in the three realms. You are young and you just heard that this was all 500 years ago. Such a lawless and evil monster is my apprentice. I can't eat well and sleep well all day. I'm always worried that he will eat me when he's in a bad mood. And my second apprentice, Zhu Baji, was originally the head of the Tianhe Navy, a man of great power. Back then, he was in charge of thousands of naval forces. He was banished to the realm by the Jade Emperor because of his mistakes and turned into a pig demon who cannibalized people without blinking. Think about it, he used to control thousands of people, but now he has to be disciplined by a very weak monk like me. He is also angry every day. You have to grit your teeth, completely dissatisfied. Besides, my three apprentices, the third prince of West Blue, the tall, rich and handsome in the ocean of others, are also because they were apprentices under me, and they were wronged. Every day they looked at me, they wanted to chew me like grass. And that monk Sand, I didn't take him as my apprentice at all, he is mentally retarded, don't bother." Zhang Yang talked nonsense, and then observed Qingfeng and Mingyu, and found that there was light in their eyes. "Elder, your apprentices are so powerful, how did you survive?" Qingfeng asked. "Yeah, you can still come here if you don't have the skills," Mingyu also said. Having said all that, Zhang Yang had no choice but to look up. He waved his sleeves, sat up straight, glanced at the teapot on the table, and said, "Come have a cup of tea first, and I'll tell you about them later. How can it not hurt me?" Qingfeng hurriedly filled Zhang Yang with tea and water, then sat down obediently and listened to Zhang Yang bragging. Zhang Yang took a sip of tea and said calmly, "Last time I said in the book that I took in 3 unruly apprentices. But how could they be willing to walk all the way with me for so long? Of course, you all know that I am the reincarnation of Jin Chanzi, and I have the ability. Just speaking a little bit is enough to make any demon be scared. I will tell you about my great son Tathagata golden bell cover. The origin of this golden bell jar is a bit long. Back then, in the chaotic world outside the three realms, I fought fiercely with an Arlong that was born at the same time as the universe. This Arlong was glowing with golden light. One of its eyes is bigger than your Wuzhuangguan, its body is 108,000 miles long, and its ability is quite remarkable. It can summon the primitive lightning generated during the Big Bang of the universe, and can destroy an Earth. In other words, the three realms can be easily destroyed by him now. As for me, I can kill him with a slight movement of my toes, but I am merciful, so I let him live. He is so grateful, so he pulled out the dragon scales all over his body and gave it to me. I got a golden bell, saying it could keep me safe. After speaking, Zhang Yang stood up, opened his arms, and said to Qingfeng and Mingyu, "You two go together, use the most powerful spells, the most powerful magic weapons, and exert the greatest energy, with the mentality of destroying me. Attack me." Chapter 479, The Secret of Ginseng Fruit. It is said that Wukong and his group came to the backyard after they came out of the body, and as Zhang Yang assumed, the condition for seeing the ginseng fruit tree is the primordial spirit. At this time, the backyard was no longer empty, and a huge tree that required 5 people to barely surround it, emitting scattered green light, appeared in front of them. The fruit on this tree is the ginseng fruit that smiles like a baby. Sha Seng had seen this ginseng fruit before. In the past, when the Peach Fair, Junyuan Daxian gave this to the Queen Mother. He only watched it and couldn't even smell it. Now that he saw the tree full of fruit, he was so excited that he danced around the ginseng fruit tree. Baji walked aside, tied the iron chain to the wooden post, and then walked over and asked, "Brother Monkey, it's strange, how can you hear the babies cry now, but can hear their laughter instead?" Wukong stared at the smiling ginseng fruits on the ginseng fruit tree, pricked up his ears and listened for a long time, and determined that the laughter came from these fruits. He saw Catwoman thinking about something, and asked, "Girl, there is no one around now, why don't you tell us what this ginseng fruit tree has to do with the bamboo forest behind Luojia Mountain in South Blue?" Cat Niang looked at Sun Wukong. She shook her head and said, "I want to live a little longer." At this time, Bajia had circled around the ginseng fruit tree for several times, but he still didn't find any clues, but the ginseng fruit on the tree kept laughing, and he felt a little uncomfortable. Wukong doesn't intend to embarrass Catgirl either. She should have some background, otherwise she wouldn't even know a thing or two about Guanyin Bodhisattva. It's still the old saying, the more you know, the more dangerous it is. I'm afraid this is her bargaining chip, not to be destroyed by Guanyin. Of chips. Wukong also went to the tree to observe. The surface of the tree was covered with moss, like the vines of human blood vessels crisscrossed. At first glance, he thought it was a thick hand sticking out from the ground. Baji jumped up and knocked out a ginseng fruit, only to see that ginseng fruit fell from the tree and got into the soil. After Baji landed and looked around for several times, he felt strange, and then asked everyone present, "Is the fruit that I hit taken away by you?" Cat Niang and Wukong shook their heads. They didn't pay attention to where the fruit fell. Baji was desperate to find it. He was really impatient. He turned out a 9-toothed rake and smashed it to the ground, and then shouted, "Land, give it to the old pig." Out. After a burst of blue smoke, a landman really emerged from the ground. When he saw the monkey and pig in front of him, he lowered his head and prepared to burrow back. However, Baji was quick-witted, grabbed the land's hair and pulled him out. "It hurts." The land shouted and was pulled out of the ground, but when he came out, everyone saw a strange rope tied to the belly of the land and went straight to the ground. Wukong came over and grabbed the earth's ear and asked, "Old man, you stole the ginseng fruit we knocked down." "Aiya, great sage equaling heaven, it has been 500 years and you haven't changed your temper. If you want to do it, you will do it." The earth's ears hurt, and he said, "The great sage doesn't know anything. This ginseng fruit, the tree, is the beginning of chaos. the spiritual root that was born when the heaven and the earth were not opened. This tree is the only one in the whole world. It blooms every 3,000 years, bears fruit every 3,000 years, and matures after another 3,000 years. Nearly 10,000 years later, there are only 30 fruits, just like a baby under 3 years old, with complete limbs and 5 senses. If you smell it, you can live for 360 years, and if you eat one, you can live for 47,000 years. This treasure is intimidated by the 5 elements. It falls when it encounters gold, it withers when it encounters wood, it melts when it encounters water, it scorches when it encounters fire, and it penetrates when it encounters soil. Can get it. When Tutu said this, Wukong reached out and pulled out the rope on his stomach. Tutu turned pale in shock, and hurriedly pulled it back, breaking into a cold sweat. He said, "Great sage, this can't be dragged around. If you cut it off for me, my soul will be destroyed." Baji asked, "What kind of rope is this? It's so powerful." The land turned back and said to Baji, "Tianpeng doesn't know anything, and I can't explain it to you. If you want to eat ginseng fruit, you must go to the 2 Taoist boys in Wuzhuangguan, and come to Jinjizizi. And a tray, just knock it down and take 2 bites." Quote. Wukong grabbed the earth's ear again and asked, "Don't talk about anything else. I ask you, what is the purpose of this rope on your stomach?" There were a lot of beads of sweat on the land's forehead, and he wiped his brows and said with a frown, "Great sage, you can't force me. I am Fengjun Yuan Daxian here to guard the ginseng fruit tree. This rope is related to the secret of the ginseng fruit tree. I really don't dare to say, this Junyuan Daxian will make me cramp and skin, and my soul will vanish." Wukong sneered twice and scolded, "Well, you old man, I'm just afraid of that Zhen Yuanzi, not my old grandson. I tell you, I will put you into the 18th hell now, and then let the old king of hell put you down locked in hell forever, never turn over." Tutu heard that his eyes were about to pop out, and the whites of his eyes were bleeding. He gritted his teeth and broke free from Sun Wukong's hand, and then said viciously, "Okay, it's a dead end anyway, so don't blame me. Today, I will let you all be buried under this ginseng fruit tree, and I will not dare to do anything to Daxian Junyuan." Speaking of the land, he opened his arms and chanted the mantra, and the ginseng fruit tree began to move violently. When Wukong saw this, he took out the golden cudgel from his ear and hit the ground on the head. However, a vine was pulled from the ginseng fruit tree trunk and wrapped around his golden cudgel. Immediately, many rattans came alive like snakes, twisting their bodies to entangle Wukong, Baji, Catgirl, and Sha Seng, then lifted them up, and threw them into the ground. Sand Monk was tied to a wooden post, and the rattan was pulling his body tightly. Only the sound of dislocating bones came from Sand Monk's wrist. He snorted heavily in pain, and tears were rolling in his eyes. Finally, his wrist was torn off alive, and then his whole body was thrown up, and like Goku and the others, he was thrown into the ground. The ground was a huge abyss. They kept falling. Wukong rolled a few somersaults, cast a spell, and spit fire out of his mouth, burning through the canes that were pulling them deep underground. Catgirl used her claws to clasp the stone wall, and Baji also stuck to the stone wall with a rake. Wukong called Somersault Cloud to stay in the air, while Sand Monk, who fell from above, was caught by him and placed on Somersault Cloud. Cat Neong looked at Monk Sha's wrist with bare bones, still dripping blood. Her scalp went numb. Chapter 480, It's about to be exposed. Under the ginseng fruit tree is a huge cylindrical abyss. The surrounding stone walls seem to be artificially excavated, but they are covered with wrinkled roots. Below is the bottomless abyss, and the creepy sounds of babies crying are coming up from below. Sand Monk's wrist was broken alive, bones and meridians were exposed to the air, and blood was constantly pouring out from it, leaking out like a faucet that was not tightly closed. Wukong pulled out 2 monkey hairs and blew them on his mouth. The monkey hairs floated onto Sha Seng's wrists, and then turned into 2 fake hands, which were attached to his wrists. The blood was stopped, but the pain was unforgettable, and Sha Seng rolled his eyes, and the whole person was unconscious. Wukong stared at the light above his head and said, "Go up first, Miss Cat, can you?" I'm someone who knows people through somersaults. I can only bring a sand monk. I can't take you. You can let Baji carry it on your back. Catgirl showed the sharp nails on her other paw and said, climbing walls is what cats are best at. So the group began to move upwards. Wukong stepped on the somersault cloud with Sand Monk on his back. He followed at the back of the group. Baji used the power of the nine-toothed nail rake and then used the technique of climbing clouds. In the middle of the group, Catwoman's speed the fastest. She walked at the front, as easily as crawling on a flat surface on a vertical stone wall. Just after the group of people moved about half a column of incense upwards like this, Cat Neong stopped and looked at the stone wall in front of her and suddenly felt familiar. Baji came to her side. He was relatively large and looked very tired. His whole body was soaked with sweat. He panted and asked, "What's the matter, Miss Cat? Go on, it's estimated that it will take some time to climb." Wukong also flew up, looked up at the halo that still couldn't see the top, and said, "Why is it so strange? This distance shouldn't be that far." Catgirl said, "Look at the scratches in front of me. They were clearly left when I was climbing. Why are they appearing now? Could it be that someone has climbed up in this way before us?" Baji suddenly thought of something, and he said to them with a cold back, "Could it be that we have been looping the road just now? This is a dead end, commonly known as ghost hitting the wall." Wukong didn't believe in evil, so he put Sha Seng on Baji's back and said, "My old grandson's somersault cloud is 108,000 miles in one turn, and I can't believe it and can't fly out. You wait, my grandson is going to." After saying that, Wukong turned somersaults up. When the distance of 108,000 miles was completed, he stopped and realized that what Baji said was right. This is really a dead end. Looking back, Baji and Cat Neong were where he could see with the naked eye. From the perspective of Baji and Cat Neong, Wukong really didn't fly very far, and they could still see him. Wuchi had to scratch his ears and cheeks, so he had to fly back, and after a somersault, he returned to Baji and Cat Neong's side, and then put Sha Seng back on the somersault cloud. Catgirl said, "It seems that we can only go down. There is no way to get out." Wukong shook his head and said, "I can't walk easily. My old grandson is anxious when he hears the cries of those babies. Now I will try to destroy this place." He slammed the end of the golden hoop stick on inside the stone wall, and then cast a spell, causing the golden hoop to stretch violently. Suddenly, the top of the golden hoop sticked out from the opposite wall and pressed straight on the back of Wukong's head. He turned his head in surprise, his mind blank. "Brother Monkey, why don't you just go down? This is really a dead end." Baji also fell into despair. At least let's see what the secret of the ginseng fruit tree is, and there is no regret in death. At the same time, in the Wuzhuang temple above Wukong and the others, Zhang Yang spread his arms, signaling Qingfeng and Mingyu to beat him to death. However, Qingfeng and Mingyu have used all kinds of weapons, tables, benches, gold hammers, bricks, etc., but they can't break the golden bell outside Zhang Yang's body. Qingfeng was so tired that he sat down on the ground. "It really is an eminent monk, now I believe what you said." Mingyu lay on Qingfeng's body, panting and said, "Elder, what happened to that dragon after you?" Zhang Yang sat back on the chair with a stinky face, and said proudly, "I was scared away by me. I'm so powerful. After he gave me the golden bell, he ran away, and ran to the other side of the universe, never again. Will not appear." Qingfeng was deeply attracted by Zhang Yang's bragging bull, and he praised, "It seems that even if it is my master, it is not necessarily your opponent, elder." Mingyu nodded in agreement. "No, my master lives with the sky, and Elder Tang lives with the universe. The two are not at the same level at all. Maybe Elder Tang can kill master with one finger." Hearing them talking more and more mysteriously, Zhang Yang waved his hand and said, "Oh, it's all right, it's getting late, I should probably go back to rest. I won't eat this ginseng fruit." Then he called and slowly came with a load of ginseng fruit waiting for Zhang Yang to go back to eat. Then he got up and left. When I came to the door of the room where I lived, through the door I found that Wukong and the others were still maintaining a motionless posture. This is really strange. It's been a long time since they came. It's too long. At this time, the voices of Qingfeng and Mingyu came from the other side, and Zhang Yang hurriedly closed the door so that they would not see the situation inside. Ah, don't the elders go into rest? Qingfeng said. That's right, it's so late. Mingyu said. Zhang Yang hurried down and hugged them left and right, and said with a smile, the apprentices are all asleep. I'm afraid to go in and disturb them, so let me tell you the story of the battle with Ultraman Tiga. Qingfeng shook his head. No need for the elders, we have to go to see the ginseng fruit tree, and go back to sleep after the inspection. Zhang Yang thought this was broken. What if they saw monkeys in the past and they were stealing fruit? No matter what Zhang Yang could do, he couldn't let them pass, so he stubbornly dragged them back. Mingyu struggled and said, Elder, if you have something to say, let's wait for the tutor to come back tomorrow and talk to us together. At this moment, an old man's voice came from behind them. Zhang Yang turned around and saw a short old man standing there with a dark face. He subconsciously shook his whole body and thought about it. In order to delay the time for the apprentices, Zhang Yang let go of Qingfeng and Mingyu, deliberately walked towards the short old man with a big smile on his back, then squatted down and hugged him, saying, Da Xian Zhenyuan, I didn't expect you to come back so early. My old friend, I miss you so much, why don't we go back to the house and have a good chat?